He is the final boss of 7 deadly dungeons, but he is extremely lazy. However, those dungeons were ruled by 7 demon lords, who worked under him, and nobody could beat these dungeons, so the hero's party entered it and managed to clear it to the last room. However, they were instantly wiped out by our protagonist's magic. And that is the intro. Help us reach 1,000 subs and let's begin. In the dark cave, water drips steadily from the sharp stalactites above. A group of people, illuminated by a faint light, express concern and offer encouragement to an injured companion. Suddenly, the injured person collapses, unable to hold on any longer. The group fears they might all die as more people collapse and the healers run out of mana. Despite the dire situation, the bandaged man reassures others by expressing confidence in the Empire. He reminds them that the hero, Burn, is there as well. At the front, Burn hears the others talking and assumes they're fine, though he knows his party members are starting to waver. When he first departed with the party, there were 74 members, but now only 43 remain. Acknowledging this, Burn clenches his teeth and fists, noting he didn't lose those 31 people. Instead, he thinks of it as only 43 people surviving, having failed to protect the 31 allies despite their best efforts. Burn has accepted that this is the reality, knowing everyone resolved themselves for something like this to happen. The place where Burn's party is one of the malevolent dungeons, the core of the ancient. A knight calls out to Burn and, pointing ahead, tells him to look there. Burn does so and sees a massive opening, a dark passage like a door entrance. He realizes they have arrived at the end of the dungeon, the end of the core of the ancient. That place is the finishing line of the adventure, which holds countless, unimaginable treasures. Burn hopefully anticipates that with their luck, they will also find the greatest fruits of humanity, the 36 virtuous masterpieces. Also, this place is where the dungeon's master rests. Suddenly, the place starts to shake violently, and Burn reaches for his sword. He turns around and bellows for everyone to get into formation. Heeding the order, the swordsmen and those with shields go to the front while magicians produce light to give vision. However, at that moment, the shaking abruptly stops. The magician increases the intensity of the light while telling others to keep their guard up. As the light fills the dungeon, it reveals the massive body of the final boss, who seems to be resting. Suddenly, the boss's dark, golden-like eyes open. Seeing this, Burn begins sweating, intimidated. The boss then opens his huge, small cave-like mouth, revealing its sharp teeth, and yawns. Now terrified, Burn shouts to his companions to flee, stating it will be impossible to fight. Moments later, a skeleton summarizes the situation, stating that humans attacked while the final boss was asleep, and despite his exhaustion, he fought valiantly. The boss affirms that it's all correct. Looking proud, he also notes that he faced 2 enemies at the same time, both humans, and his exhaustion. With an uneasy expression, he asks the skeleton, whose name is Patrick, to calm down, but Patrick says he can't calm down in such a situation. Pointing at the boss, Patrick bellows, reminding the boss that he is supposed to be the boss monster, not someone who dozes off. Patrick keeps scolding the boss monster for being careless and yawning in front of the humans. He bellows, telling the boss to set his mind straight, as he turns to a person named Renee, asking what she thinks. Renee replies she doesn't know, but points out that the boss monster managed to overwhelm the humans with just a yawn. She then gives an impressed look, saying she is shocked by the grandeur of the boss monster once more. Patrick is unable to believe Renee is taking the situation so lightly. Annoyed, he sits down, buries his face in his hands, and screams that the dungeon is screwed. The dungeon they are in is one of the 7 malevolent dungeons, which humanity has judged to be impossible to raid, giving it the name Core of the Ancient. Most of the dungeon raids always end with humans victorious. The main reason is that humans attack at will, forcing the monsters into constant defense, creating an unequal relationship. The repetition of war always results in the dungeons weakening. During the age of countless dungeon creations and raids, exceptional dungeons occasionally emerged that humanity couldn't raid. But thinking about it, it's always an obvious thing. Humanity temporarily halted the malevolent dungeons, more accurately known as the 7 malevolent dungeons, deeming them impossible to clear. Even among the notorious 7 malevolent dungeons, in the core of the ancient, the most diabolical monsters exist, who defend that dungeon. On top of that, there also exist the dungeon's guardians, defending 3 major paths. The red path on the left is defended by a homunculus, the blade maid named Renee. The central blue path is defended by a skeleton, the death knight named Patrick. The final path on the right is infested with filth, and without accurate information, its defenses are an unknown number of tentacles. The being which rules this impenetrable fortress is an ancient monster which appears on the first page of the Empire's mythos, named Swallow. Lord Swallow ordered the information documented in a book and distributed it, leading to more intruders entering the dungeon. Lord Swallow claims it's a way to maintain the dungeon, noting that if they surround themselves in mystery, no humans would come in. He stresses the need to give humans enough information about the dungeon to encourage them to enter. This has drawn humans into the dungeon like moths to a flame, unaware half the information they know is false. Despite this, Lord Swallow never expected such a large influx of humans entering the dungeon. Recalling the number of bodies he saw, he believes they must have been around 74. He also recalls that most of the equipment carried by those humans was melted down, with only some items retaining value. Renee claims if she was there, she could have dealt with those humans without damaging the goods. Lord Swallow thinks for a moment and mutters, "Sure." Suddenly, his body starts dissolving into a dark smoke-like thing before Renee. As Renee looks up, from the smoke, a hand extends out. Seconds later, Lord Swallow transforms into a man and strokes Renee's hair, telling her she could have done better. Renee blushes and gives a small giggle. The skeleton, Patrick, reminds the other two that they are gathered there for a meeting and not to fool around. With a serious tone, he asks them why they are so excited. He then begins roaring with laughter, claiming the mood there is so sweet, he might get a cavity. He bellows louder, saying not only would his teeth rot, but even the rest of his skull would rot too. He points out to Lord Swallow that he should polymorph properly, reminding him he has 6 fingers, which Lord Swallow sees as well. Patrick begins laughing again, reminding Swallow that when he polymorphed last time, he had more than 40 teeth. Annoyed, Renee tells Patrick to stop talking so loud, prompting him to consider quitting as guardian. Frustrated with the task. Holding a few reports, Renee says she will get to the main point. The 3 guardians take their seats, and Renee reports that the humans have finally started taking the correct path. She explains that during the last raid, the 166 black tentacles in the right path received major injuries. Yawning, Lord Swallow reassures them not to worry, noting the remarkable regeneration of the tentacles and suggesting they find a temporary replacement. Patrick asks Swallow to find another guardian, expressing his desire to quit, but Swallow reminds him that he is a slave. Patrick gives a despairing look while Swallow claims the humans will now only take the right path. Patrick believes the humans must already be creating another party at that very moment. Renee mentions that humans use communication spells for faster dissemination, indicating that news about the right path opening must have spread widely. Lord Swallow suggests devising a counter-strategy and recommends changing their assignments as a first step. He instructs Renee to take the infected path to the right instead of her usual red path. Lord Swallow thinks the humans will swarm the path to the right, thinking it as an opening, so he instructs Renee to protect it. He then turns to Patrick and orders him to protect the red path after Renee leaves it, causing Patrick to ask why him. Swallow explains that once humans realize Renee is on the infected path, they'll redirect to the red path, so Patrick should defend it. He expresses confidence that if they do this, they can defend against 2 attacks. Patrick asks Swallow what they will do if the humans decide to take the central blue path. Following a silence, Swallow says he will defend the blue path. Patrick thinks the plan is flawed, but Renee approves, deeming it perfect. Saying that the urgent matter is taken care of, Renee asks what they should do with that sword. Unaware of the sword, Swallow asks what it is, and Renee refers to the sword used by the leader of the earlier invading party. She claims that the leader was using the sword very well and expresses surprise at seeing humans that strong. Lord Swallow once again asks what sword. Patrick turns sideways and sees it, grabbing it. He says that the sword is one of the 36 virtuous masterpieces and believes the sword is the 14th, named Tanabella. Lord Swallow remembers he had heard of them before. Renee says the blade she is holding is one of the 36 masterpieces as well. Patrick asks what they should do with the sword. He offers it to Lord Swallow, but Lord Swallow suggests Patrick use it himself. Patrick is taken aback at being offered the weapon. He begins to laugh, saying he will gladly accept the weapon. The dungeon is named the Core of the Ancient, infested with a fearsome maid and a death knight who exudes the aura of death. Lord Morgan, nearly falling asleep, murmurs that Patrick should take back his resignation letter since he has now been given a weapon. Renee is a devoted sunflower who gazes only at Lord Swallow, while Patrick, the dungeon's sole conscience, is adept at scrutinizing his boss. And Lord Swallow is an ancient monster who is lazy, Renee asks Lord Swallow what to do with their remaining profits. Swallow suggests they do as usual and use the extra as bait for the next intruders. Delighted, Renee says she will take care of the distribution. She mentions that there aren't any monsters who need magic items and asks if she should sell the mana stones. Lord Swallow considers for a moment and asks if he should go to the human village to sell the items. Hearing this, both Renee and Patrick are bewildered, causing Swallow to be shocked, asking why they are surprised. Patrick points to Renee and suggests it will be better for her to go. Annoyed, Swallow asks what the problem is with him going, and Patrick mentions he is clumsy at transforming into a human. Swallow remains silent. He says it's fine and tells Renee to bring back lots of tasty things. The next moment, Renee gets ready, and exclaiming the weather is good, sets off to the village. Before leaving, she bids goodbye to Lord Swallow. She enters a shop and offers the mana stones to the merchant, who scans them and says he can't buy them. Renee, looking cross, asks why not. The merchant ponders a while and, grabbing a stone, says it's a B-rank mana stone, to buy which a commoner would need to save for 10 years. He mentions that the other stones require the skill of an Imperial Palace magician or a high-ranking magician to use. He considers that a jeweler in the capital or a magic tower wing might be able to handle the stones. Renee claims the capital is too far, which leaves the magic tower. Though she doesn't want to go there, she will do it for Lord Swallow. And she grabs the bag of stones and heads out. The merchant notices a gem is still left on the table, and he shouts at Renee about it. Renee turns her head and tells the merchant to keep it as a tip for the information he gave. Picking the stone, the merchant mutters Renee is a strange brat. Renee arrives at the magic tower wing. A mage tells her to consult with the guild master if she wants to sell mana stones. He offers to guide Renee to the office. As she follows the mage, she notices the magic tower is similar to dungeons. A while later, Renee reaches the office where the mage introduces her to the tower's leader, Gromit's Amr. Gromit asks for Renee's name, and Renee introduces herself, while acknowledging Gromit's impressive mana. Gromit claims she was going to ignore Renee, but knowing she has mana stones, she decided otherwise. She hopes Renee brought high-ranking mana stones suitable to the status of the tower. Telling Gromit to see for herself, Renee empties the stones on the table, at which Gromit becomes shocked. She picks them up, still baffled, and notices their high quality, thinking a kid like Renee shouldn't have them. Wondering who Renee is, Gromit asks her where she found the stones. Looking at Renee's hair, she finds it kind of familiar. She mentions a family with silver hair among the Empire's 8 great houses and wonders if Renee belongs to that family and ran away with the stones. Her suspicion grows as she can't think of any other way Renee could have got those mana stones and concludes Renee is a noble lady. So she apologizes to Renee for her rudeness and offers to purchase all the stones, offering 50 ounces of gold for each. Hearing 50 ounces of gold, Renee remembers the merchant had told her a commoner would need to save for 10 years to buy her mana stones. She knows that a commoner makes about 10 ounces of gold per year, so for 10 years it should be 100 ounces. Looking angry, Renee warns Gromit that if she is lying, she will die. Taken aback, Gromit apologizes, realizing Renee knows more than she thought. She mentions that even with all their combined gold, they can't buy all the stones, to which Renee suggests they buy only what they can afford. Gromit gulps. After a while, she brings out 2,000 ounces of gold, saying it's all they have. She offers to give the gold as well as other items of value in exchange for all the mana stones Renee has. Renee says the items have to be of good quality and easily sellable, to which Gromit reassures her. Pointing ahead, Gromit tells Renee to follow her. Walking up the stairs, Gromit mentions that the place is usually forbidden to outsiders but decides to make an exception for Renee, and she takes Renee to the tower's storage. Inside, Gromit shows Renee around, pointing out equipment like a tiara made of 4-carat diamonds and a living black pearl, a marvel of alchemy. Renee's attention is grabbed by the word alchemy. She begins staring at the pearl with an angry look. Seeing this, Gromit quickly covers the pearl, acknowledging that the art of alchemy disgusts many. She then points to a heart-shaped stone, explaining it's called the Crimson Love Stone, with rumors that it makes one's love a reality. Hearing this, Renee's eyes begin sparkling. Gromit claims that infusing mana into the jewel before someone they like will cause the spirit in the jewel to bring about eternal love between them. Taking interest in the love stone, Renee asks if it works on anyone, to which Gromit swears it does. Gromit asks Renee if she is interested in the stone, and Renee affirms she is. Gromit giggles and says that the love stone can even steal the heart of an emperor, deeming it priceless. Renee looks disappointed, but wanting the love stone, she makes a huge offer. Gromit's face turns into horror seeing what Renee is offering. Renee has taken out her blade, one of the 36 masterpieces, which she offers along with the mana stones for the love stone. A mage in glasses is shocked to learn Grommets really gave away the stone as he asks her about it. He reminds Grommets that the love stone is really dangerous and warns it might bring death to Renee. But Grommets doesn't seem to care as she claims Renee herself traded it. With an evil look, she assures the mage to not worry. She reveals that Renee will instantly die as soon as she releases the curse from the love stone along with the person she likes. Meanwhile, Renee, with a pleased look, is on her way, unaware of the dangers of the stone she carries. At one of the 7 malevolent dungeons, Chait Castle, a woman holding a comb and scissors says someone's ends are dying and trims off some hair of that person. Renee, having her hair done by the woman, apologizes for coming without notice, to which the woman says it's okay. With a smile, she says she loves seeing Renee. She is the boss of the Chait Castle, her name Ursabet Bathory. In a pampering tone, Bathory says Renee looks pretty no matter what. She also jokingly says she is jealous of homunculi, noting that Renee's face will never age. Renee compliments Bathory back, saying she also looks very young with paler skin. Bathory asks Renee if she knows how many beauty products and how much blood she has to use in a day to look good. Nervously, Renee asks Bathory how she looks right now. Bathory tells Renee she is the most beautiful girl. Teasing Renee's cheeks, Bathory assures her no one will reject her pretty looks, causing Renee to blush. Bathory then asks Renee why she is getting herself dolled up so suddenly and asks her if she will go and confess her love to someone. Holding the love stone, Renee grins and admits she is really going to confess. Hearing this, Bathory is speechless. Her face turns to shock as she bellows out, asking Renee who she will confess to, noting she was just joking before. Renee gleefully admits she will confess to Lord Swallow. Once again, Bathory is speechless. Sweating with uncertainty, she tells Renee to not joke. Renee assures she is not joking and claims she will really confess to Lord Swallow. Looking disappointed, Bathory asks Renee what she likes about Lord Swallow. Renee replies that she likes a lot of things about Swallow, including his strength. Bathory says just being strong is not enough and reminds Renee that Lord Swallow is really lazy. Renee says she knows Lord Swallow is lazy and always eats and just sleeps, and also he snores and is tactless and also fat. Bathory is unable to believe that despite these qualities, Renee still likes Lord Swallow. Renee repeats she really likes Swallow. Finally giving up on consoling Renee, Bathory hopes it works out and winks, telling her to return if she gets rejected. Blushing deeply, Renee thanks Bathory and shows confidence her confession will succeed, still holding on to the love stone. At Imperial Capital, Liaise. In the Dungeon Subjugation Coalition, a man informs that the subjugation party of the hero Burn has been annihilated. The man who said this is standing as around him are many people all seated. Another man slams the table and, standing, says that's all nonsense, noting that it was said Burn's party easily defeated the Guardian. Another man speaks up, saying the bodies haven't been discovered, asking the first man how he can be sure. Yet another man shouts out that Sir Burn would never fall to any monsters. The man standing insists Burn's party would complete the mission in a day, and since 2 days have passed without contact, he believes Burn has likely been killed. The man sitting at the far end, likely the head, asks if that's the case, then what happened to Burn's sword, one of the 36 virtuous masterpieces? The man standing says communication was cut off when Burn's party reached the core of the ancient's heart and suggests they won't be able to retrieve that sword. The head acknowledges this information. One of them suggests they hurry and go to get the sword, but another says it will be impossible since even Burn's party failed there. Another man says they can't give up so easily and believes Burn must have gravely injured the boss monster, which is agreed by one other. One puts forward a suggestion to gather all their forces and go all in into the dungeon and put an end to it. Meanwhile, the head is in a dilemma as he knows if the second team fails, it will be really bad. But he is also certain if they sit still, the Imperial family will be after them. On top, he is worried what if Burn never managed to injure the ancient moss monster and their new team all fail miserably. He speaks out that it will be impossible for them to conquer the dungeon core of the ancient. This statement puts an end to other members' conversations. At that moment, another person walks in, saying he is curious. He walks forwards, saying he believes the dungeon can be easily conquered. The head sees the newcomer and exclaims it's the Imperial Magic Research Association, asking why he is there. The man from the Imperial Magic Research Association, the third eye, followed by others, laughs and asks the head if he knows whose orders the association follows. The head curses, realizing the Imperial family is already interfering. The third eye takes a seat and says that since his association is there, the people in that room will pay for their sins. He scowls in anger and accuses them of not only getting an honored hero killed but also losing the Imperial Majesty's precious virtuous masterpieces. All the members sweat in fear at this accusation. The third eye claims that if he kills everyone there, no one will be left to coordinate the countless subjugation teams of the Empire. He then informs that the Majesty has made a proposal which will ensure every member there will live. He says that they will have to raid the core of the Ancient once more. The head says that it's impossible since even Sir Byrne was unable. The third eye grins and announces they will use Nifrim. Hearing this, the members are all shocked. Even the head, bewildered, says that Nifrim was a hybrid with many issues. The third eye claims Nifrim isn't a failed product but is unquestionably successful. He slams a hand on the table, saying he has one question. He asks the head why Byrne and his team did not survive the trip to the core of the Ancient. He notes that Byrne's team wasn't weak nor reckless, questioning why. He himself explains that there is something Byrne and his team lacked. Raising his pinky finger up, the third eye claims they lack just one thing. He says that thing is held by Nifrim, and he tells the head to make sure the raid is successful the second time. Meanwhile, back in the dungeon, Lord Swallow gives a loud sneeze. He is getting a kind of ominous feeling as if a big storm is coming. He transforms back into his monstrous form, sneezes loudly, blowing stones off the ground, and wonders if he has the flu. Lord Swallow groans on the floor, reluctant to patrol further due to fear of imminent human intrusion and Patrick's potential scolding. Even though Patrick is just a skeleton, Lord Swallow is terrified of him. Muttering lazily, he pushes himself off the ground, claiming he doesn't want to be bothered anymore. As he had heard humans enter the dungeon through the sewers, he decides to head there. On his way, he encounters the core of the Ancient Guardian, the 16 tentacles, laying injured. However, he knows he can't help at the moment, so he decides to wait, and he moves forward. A bit further ahead, he finds the 5th room administrator, Anthropophago, which is also beaten up. He keeps moving ahead, thinking anthropophagi can regenerate themselves if their core body is still intact. A little ahead, he sees the core of the Anthropophago is still alive and is confident they will recover on their own. He turns around and leaps off the plant, landing down. He claims the problem now lies in rooms 1 through 4, where a slaughter has taken place. He wants to talk about the situation with Patrick but is afraid of being scolded. A large yawn escapes him, and he decides to go and rest and think about the problem later. He notes that he has looked around the sewer pathway in room 5 but didn't find much disturbance, and he turns around, hoping Patrick will understand for not inspecting further. He is hopeful he is done with his patrol when suddenly a massive sword pierces the wall of the dungeon. He stops in his tracks and recognizes humans have infiltrated once again. Looking pissed, he stares ahead at someone and decides to not let that person return back alive. But to his surprise, the infiltrator isn't a human but Renee herself, who apologizes, also thinking Lord Swallow was another human. Lord Swallow is surprised to see Renee as she apologizes again. Swallow says it's fine when, upon closer look, he realizes Renee has dressed up. Renee gives a wide smile, learning Swallow noticed the change, as she asks how she looks. Swallow sweats awkwardly and, stammering, asks if she dressed for any purpose while believing she might put in her resignation letter. Renee nervously plays with her hair and affirms it's a special occasion, and she shocks Swallow by asking him to spare some time for her. Swallow is still worried Renee will hand over a resignation letter. A while later, Renee takes Swallow to a large chamber, where 2 tables are set in the middle. She tells Swallow to take a seat while she goes to bring tea. Swallow, meanwhile, is praying she won't resign. Renee pours some tea for Swallow and says that place was a secret location only they two know now. Blushing, Renee tries to speak her mind while Swallow begins to sweat with worry she will definitely resign. Renee asks Swallow if he knows it's been 80 years since he took her in. Swallow claims he knows. 80 years ago, over 1,000 dungeons met their downfall, and thousands upon thousands of humans entered the core of the Ancient. It was then when Renee earned her alias and started growing in status. Swallow points out that Renee has been through a lot and asks if her eye is feeling better while relieved she didn't resign. Meanwhile, Renee is really happy that Swallow remembered her eyes. Swallow says he will always remember, and Renee says she was so happy she could protect him all this time. Hearing this, Swallow's face shows clear worry as he asks what Renee means by saying she was happy, believing she is saying goodbye. Renee proceeds to speak further while, shaking from worry, Swallow hopes against hope she won't resign. Renee finally speaks her heart out and tells Swallow she likes him, startling him. She repeats that she likes him and says she has been waiting for this moment for 80 years. Lord Swallow struggles to take in what Renee just said. He thanks her for saying she likes him, and he rejects her, explaining that they are always on the cusp of life and death and never know when they will die. Clutching her cloth, Renee says she expected it and knew she was pushing it on. She claims it was too heavy for her heart to carry the confession forever, but she says the thought of getting rejected is terrifying as she takes out the love stone. She expresses that she wants to be loved by Lord Swallow no matter what it takes, and she begins infusing mana into the stone, ready to stoop so low, while Swallow tells her to calm down. She extends the love stone towards Swallow, believing now he will love her. However, Swallow senses something foul as dark energy surrounds him, asking Renee if she is trying to kill him. Taken aback, Renee lets go of the stone, which begins to shatter into pieces. Looking down, she notices a dark figure-like thing emerging from the broken pieces of the stone. Patrick, looking down, exclaims that Lord Swallow is the best. He points out that Swallow didn't just drive the humans away but also chased Renee too. Claiming he is so astonished by Swallow's wrath, Patrick finds it difficult to even get his jaws to click shut. Meanwhile, Lord Swallow, laying down, asks how he should handle it, and Patrick tells him to figure out the solution himself since he caused the problem. Holding the broken piece of the love stone, Patrick crushes it and acknowledges that it's not entirely Lord Swallow's fault. Turning to Swallow, Patrick asks why his ears are shut. Swallow says that he doesn't remember anything, to which Patrick offers to help him remember, and he explains that when he arrived earlier, he saw Swallow enraged with fury and Renee kneeling before him. Patrick shouted at Swallow to calm down. Lord Swallow's face was all disoriented, and his expression was blank, and Renee was speechless. Patrick was confused at first seeing the incident. Renee, who was on her knees, was crying, realizing she made a mistake. Patrick had shouted at Renee to come back to her senses and told her to get out of there, and he had tried to move towards her but couldn't in his current state, also worried she would get in his way, and he withdrew his sword and slammed it in front of her, sending her flying backward with force. Renee was taken by surprise as she landed a few feet away, while Patrick apologetically thought that was the only way to ensure her safety. He then turned towards Lord Swallow, wondering what to do next. Lord Swallow, seeing Patrick, had asked him if he wanted to kill him as well. With this, Patrick finished relaying the flashback. At present, Patrick asks Swallow if he really doesn't remember that at all, and Swallow apologizes for the event. Patrick says that's good as Lord Swallow admitted the mistake quickly and asks him why he reacted that way back then. Lord Swallow asks if he should go and find Renee, and Patrick says he should, pointing out that Renee is important for their dungeon. She would do every kind of work like managing monsters' diets, cleaning, restoring the dungeon, and many more such tasks. Lord Swallow agrees that losing her would be really devastating for the dungeon. Patrick suggests Swallow find her before it's too late, even if he needs to beg her to stay or kiss her shoes to bring her back. Since Lord Swallow is going to look for Renee, Patrick hands him Demira, a bracelet that helps stabilize one's mana. Patrick tells Swallow to not think about more details and claims the bracelet is expensive. He hopes the bracelet will stabilize Swallow's mana flux and prevent his body from pulsing too severely in his polymorphed state. Lord Swallow asks Patrick where he got the bracelet from, and Patrick says he picked it off the floor, and he requests Swallow to not do anything strange with the bracelet as it's fragile. Swallow puts it on, saying he will see about it, and he turns around, walking away and instructing Patrick to take care of the place. Patrick reminds Swallow to return in 5 days, claiming the humans will be back. Swallow asks if Patrick wants him back before the subjugation party arrives, which Patrick affirms. Patrick is worried that he might not be able to fend off the intruders in Swallow's absence, and he again reminds Swallow that 5 days is all he has to return. Walking away, Swallow says he will return with Renee within 5 days. Patrick shouts out, telling Swallow to not try to stand out too much if he gets close to a village. Swallow says alright and, turning his head, grins and jokingly says he will wreak havoc if things go south. Patrick sighs and notes that things are getting more complicated than expected. He knows that Renee gave up the beheading Fong and brought a mana stone containing a demon which nearly got her killed. Patrick is worried if Swallow finds out about this, he will cause mayhem, and an apocalypse will occur. As he reads through the newspaper, he notices something causing his mouth to widen with shock. On a particular page, a headline says that the raiding of the core of the ancient dungeon will take place in 3 days. Patrick had told Swallow to return in 5 days, and now realizing the raid will be in 3 days, he is thunderstruck. He curses in rage. Meanwhile, outside somewhere far away, Lord Swallow is laying down on his back. Somewhere far away, under a clear sky, Lord Swallow is laying on his back, sounding annoyed. It's already been the second time that he's teleported to a random place. He recalls Patrick had warned him not to use any magic, pointing out his body is in a mess. He wonders if it's because his magic is faulty, but nevertheless decides to use it one last time. He sets the coordinates to the place where Renee had sold the mana stones, and so he instantly teleports, hoping it's the town of Harston. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a demoness on her throne addresses the humans who found her, offering them a glorious death. A man, looking at the demoness, mentions that she is quite proud for a demon, and he introduces his party as a seasoned subjugation party, ranked 32nd in the Empire. Raising his sword, he says his party are the elite mercenaries of the Dawn Tiger Mercenary Party. He reminds the demoness of their group's name, asserting that their fame will spread, and vows to dethrone her from her throne. The demoness calls the man an insolent fool. Getting up from the throne, she introduces herself as the 17th descendant of the Demon King Asmodeus. With an evil grin, she reveals her name, Melzda Lymf Adjura, and she shrieks at the group to bask in glory having heard her name and die. The group leader grins. He then sprints towards the demoness, shouting he will make her eat her words, while an arrow flies towards her from behind. The demoness reacts in time and blocks the arrow with her weapon. The marksman exclaims that his shot got blocked. The magician tells the party leader to leave the support to him. The demoness raises her weapon, saying puny humans don't know their place, and she curses all there to burn and disappear as she summons bright blue flames all around the hall. The party members begin to scream out as they get burned. The party leader, taken aback, TSKS as flames near him. He quickly pulls a stone slab from the ground and uses it to block the flames. At that moment, he notices ice particles and, turning around, is shocked. He realizes the demoness has cast a new spell and produced enormous crystals of ice. He grabs a small stone slab and flings it towards the demoness, claiming he won't let her get away. He also leaps off the ground and launches himself straight towards the demoness. In response, the demoness shoots the sharp ice crystals towards the party leader, asking if he seeks death. However, a barrier appears right before the leader and blocks the crystals. Seeing this, the demoness is shocked as she remembers taking care of the magician moments before, and she notices that the magician is still alive and casting spells supported by another person. Looking annoyed, she calls them insects. Then she raises her hand in front as the leader closes in, sword ready. The sword and the demoness' clawed hands are inches away from clashing when at that moment, a bright glow appears nearby. Suddenly, a massive explosion erupts, sending both the demoness and the party leader backward with force. Both of them slam nearby and are equally shocked at what just happened. A huge smoke and dust billow off the ground from the explosion, sending rubble flying everywhere. The two men ask if the leader is okay, who tells them not to worry. He asks what just happened. Meanwhile, the demoness struggles to stand up, wondering if the subjugation party's reinforcements arrived. And looking at the dust, she questions who could have arrived. As the dust settles, the outline of someone is visible. Lord Swallow, who just teleported there, asks the people around if they know where Harston is. The demoness stares at the dark outline of the new arrival among the dust, looking intimidated. Meanwhile, Lord Swallow, who just teleported there, asks if anyone knows where Harston is. Everyone there is speechless at first. The group leader and the demoness shout at Swallow, asking why he burst in there just to ask that. Swallow finds out that the demoness is a demon king. He turns to her and expresses surprise that she is really a demon king. He claims the vibe she has is totally different from the other demon kings he has run into before. At that moment, support arrives for the party, and the leader suggests they take down the demon king together. Lord Swallow, who is puzzled, tries to grab their attention, but no one pays heed to him and they begin fighting. Swallow just stands by and watches as a fierce battle between the party members and the Demon King commences. Overly irritated, he sits down as the screaming and insults fill the air. Finally, he gets fed up and his eyes begin blazing. He stands up as he remembers he needs to find Renee quickly and realizes he won't be able to talk to the lot easily. Moreover, he is worried Patrick will scold him if he is late, so he decides to act and activates his true form, producing dark tentacles all around. The people around try to flee in fear, but Swallow catches them all, and within seconds, he manages to chomp them all down. Seeing this, the Demon King is bewildered and sweating. She gets a fright when Swallow burps out loud. Stammering, she asks him what he just did. She exclaims what Swallow did was powerful and astonishing and believes he is more powerful than her. She then gives a huge smile, her eyes sparkling as she expresses a desire to know more about Swallow. Excitedly, she begins bombarding him with questions while examining his body. Seeing the Demon King this excited, Swallow's face turns into disgust as he stares at her. The Demon King clears her throat and says she will introduce herself first, and she does that, introducing herself and her name. After she is finished, she asks Swallow his name. However, Swallow's face is still showing disgust as he hates this. Despite that, he agrees to introduce himself but stops before he can reveal his name. He believes revealing his name would not be good as Patrick had warned him not to, so he fakes his name and says it's Swaldo Raunier. It's the first name that came up in his mind, though it's iffy. The Demon King asks if she can call him Lord Swaldo, which he allows. Then she thanks Swallow for saving her, but she says that wasn't necessary, claiming those guys didn't even land a single hit on her. She smiles and, saying since Swallow helped her anyway, offers help in return. Swallow says he needs help and asks her if she knows where Harston is. For a moment he is sure that the Demon King knows the answer, but the Demon King asks him back what's a Harston. With this, Swallow's hopefulness turns to disappointment as he is shocked the Demon King hasn't even heard of Harston, let alone its location, so he asks her the location of the nearest village. The Demon King says a place named Liège is the closest. Swallow wonders if it's the imperial capital as he knows it takes 2 months to reach Harston by carriage from there. Realizing he is way off the mark, he drops down on his face, annoyed. The Demon King suggests Swallow use a teleportation hub if he wants to go somewhere far. Swallow asks what a teleportation hub is. The Demon King explains that it's an invention humans made with magic and alchemy which can forcefully transport someone through space. Swallow asks her where it is. The Demon King responds that it's in Liège. It's early the next morning, and a cool breeze is blowing inside a room. The Demon King, Adra, groans and wakes up, feeling her head hurting. At that moment, Lord Swallow walks in, yawning and noting that Adra is awake. He lays his eyes upon Adra and, suddenly shocked, falls backwards, causing Adra to ask why he is so surprised. Swallow questions if his eyes are going bad as he sees that Adra's appearance has changed into a little kid. Adra claims she is not a little kid as she smacks Swallow for being impolite. Swallow, still getting beaten up, says he was just surprised to see Adra look younger. Adra firmly states that she didn't become younger. Swallow asks her to explain. She explains that her appearance the previous day was her version 2 so humans wouldn't look down on her. She points out that her current appearance is version 1. His face beaten up, Swallow asks Adra if her appearance the day before wasn't the real one, which Adra affirms. She then asks Swallow why his face is so beaten up. She blurts out that transformation magic always projects the user's future appearance. With a superior look, she claims she will look like she did yesterday when she grows up. Swallow says, okay. Pointing her finger at Swallow, Adra asks if he understands. Hearing Swallow's unenthusiastic response, Adra bellows out in rage while Swallow suggests they get new clothes first. Looking pissed, Adra warns Swallow not to treat her like a little kid. At Harston Earldom Mansion, outside the manor, horse carriages with knights arrive, and a hooded man shouts at Harston to open the gates for the subjugation party. The man claims they have come from Liège to suppress the core of the ancient. Meanwhile, inside the house, a voice asks who sent the official papers. Another voice replies that it was sent under the name of the Third Eye. Lord of the Harston, Earl Atark, clenches tightly on the papers angrily, cursing the Third Eye. He slams his hand on the table, angry at the notice which instead should have been a permission asking him to enter his territory. With clear rage, he knows that he can't kick the arrivals out as it's an order from the imperial family. He asks a butler nearby if she thinks the subjugation party can complete the core of the ancient. The butler shakes her head as a response. Atark points out that for the core of the ancient, the arrived party is too weak and says he hasn't heard of the party leader, Nifrim, before. He is also worried that if the core of the ancient is messed up, his territory will fall into crisis. He thinks he should ask for a stronger subjugation party to raid the core of the ancient. The butler tells Atark the answer is closer than he knows. Atark ponders and decides he should consult with the Magic Tower wing. He has heard that the Magic Tower expanded recently due to the high-quality mana stones of unknown origin. He grins at this opportunity. As far as he knows, the only monster on the right trail where Burn was defeated is the boss monster, Swallow. He orders the butler to request the Magic Tower to handle the core of the ancient, offering a large sum and fame. At that moment, the door of the mansion gets kicked open, and Atark asks who it is. 3 people in white cloaks walk in, asking for Lord Atark. Standing up, Atark asks who the intruders are. Nifrim says they barged in because the gates didn't open. Nifrim takes a seat as Atark asks why they came without notice, and Nifrim claims official papers were sent beforehand. With a serious face, she asks Atark if her party is not allowed. Intimidated, Atark mutters it's not like that. The girl sitting beside Nifrim requests some tea and snacks and chocolates. Atark clenches his hand in anger but tells the butler to prepare the orders. He then asks Nifrim why she is there. Nifrim says their plan is to crush the core of the ancient. Atark claims the official papers arrived only just a day before, noting Nifrim's party was quick and asking when they will depart. Nifrim says they were planning to depart that day but claims something came up, so they will depart the next day. Atark says going so soon might not be good and suggests they go fully prepared, offering to provide shelter and amenities. Nifrim reveals that they will first visit the magic tower wing and depart immediately. Atark asks why they will visit the tower. Nifrim says the reason isn't courteous but to kill everyone in that tower. Taken aback, Atark asks Nifrim what she means. Nifrim admits she has a good sense of hearing and claims she heard Atark's request to the tower. Nifrim points out that they came very far for the mission and won't give it up easily, so it's good to get rid of any disturbances. She also claims it's good for Atark since that way only a stronger party will go to subjugate the core of the ancient. Atark apologizes for his lapse and says he won't request any other group and tells Nifrim to start the raid whenever she wishes. Picking up the cookie, Nifrim mockingly says she is pleased to see Atark's favor. Meanwhile, in the dungeon, Patrick looks like he is training, slicing the statues with his sword. He is aware that it's almost time for the humans' party to arrive there. Lord Swallow asks the Demon King, Asura, where the teleportation herb is, and she says it's in Liaise. With this, Swallow, accompanied by Asura, reaches Central Liaise. Swallow decides to gather information first and find out where Renee has gone. Asura offers to help him find Renee. Swallow asks Asura, since she is the Lord of the Demon King's castle, how she will manage it if she helps him. Hearing this, Asura blushes, thinking Swallow is showing care for her. She assures him not to worry about her, noting the castle is not important and claiming she has many demons as soldiers. Swallow asks Asura if she can gather all the demons at will, which she affirms. However, she claims she hasn't tried it before. She bellows out that her father did that, so she is confident she can do it as well. She explains that the castle her father passed down is partially destroyed due to humans' actions. Despite being the Demon King, she admits having a hard time when her castle is right beside the humans' capital. However, she brushes off the talk and suggests they go and gather information, which Swallow agrees to. Following Asura, Swallow feels like something bothersome is going to happen, wondering if it's in his own head. After a while, the two of them enter a pub where they order 2 large beers. Eyeing the beer, Swallow thinks the feeling earlier wasn't just in his head. He reminds Asura they have a long way to go and asks why they are there. Asura drains the mug and bellows out it's refreshing. She then points out to Swallow that it's in pubs where they can get all kinds of information. She suggests Swallow look around and listen to all the conversations. Grinning, she claims they need to pick a specific conversation and listen to it. Scanning around, Swallow asks Asura what she means by picking conversations. At that moment, he sees something ahead and asks about it. It's a big board with lots of notices on it. Asura marvels at the board and says she didn't know about it. She informs Swallow that it's the source of all the information they can get. Swallow inspects a notice and finds out it's a list of all the subjugation parties currently entering the dungeons. He confirms that there's never been 2 groups entering one dungeon at the same time because of the wealth distribution problem. Asura claims that if humans went into the dungeons in more groups, they could probably succeed, and deems them greedy. Swallow responds that that's good. Hearing this, Asura asks him why he thinks it's good, questioning if Swallow is also a dungeon demon. She also asks him how he is able to freely walk outside if he is a real dungeon demon, causing Swallow to leave that topic. Asura points out that Swallow has lots of secrets and agrees not to press him further. At that moment, Swallow sees a notice related to his dungeon on the board. He goes closer to inspect what news might be there and is instantly bewildered. He begins to sweat while Asura tries to read the notice as well. Swallow hands the notice to Asura, who reads it and points out it's the raid advertisement of the core of the ancient. Swallow asks Asura if she knows about that dungeon, which she affirms. She takes the notice off the board and explains that the 7 malevolent dungeons have every dungeon's strength in 1. Gazing into the notice, she marvels that it's what every demon strives for. She also points out that among the 7 malevolent dungeons, the core of the ancient is the strongest of them all. She adds that the ruler of the core of the ancient is the zenith of all core monsters and shrieks that it's Lord Swallow, an excited note in her voice. Meanwhile, Lord Swallow knows that he isn't as cool as Asura described. Asura claims that the core of the ancient is her favorite dungeon. She expresses the desire to get stronger and meet Lord Swallow someday, not knowing Swallow is right in front of her. She says that it's wonderful having unapproachable strength and she wants to be like Lord Swallow. She notes that her father was very strong, but there were some stronger humans than him. She says that a hero named Burn was really strong. Lord Swallow, who had already swallowed Burn, asks if Burn defeated the Demon King. Asura says she doesn't want to spend her life managing a dungeon. She expresses a plan to enable her demons to make their own dungeons. To achieve that, Asura plans to get stronger as she asks Swallow what he thinks of her dream. Swallow smiles and agrees Asura's plan is wonderful. He then remembers his past when he was like Asura. Back then, he would lead armies powerful enough to rule the world. He tried to master all the world's knowledge, seriously regarding it. For this purpose, he associated with humans whom he used to think were pathetic and somehow got emotional with them, devoting everything to them. As time passed, he started to realize all his effort was in vain, so now in the present, he has set his life goal to sleep all day. After he finishes the flashback, he finds out that Asura is sleeping. At that moment, he hears some people talking about another subjugation request that came the day before. A man puts the request on the notice board, and Swallow decides to check it out walking towards it. Upon reaching nearer, he learns that the request is regarding a raid in his dungeon, where around 31 members are being recruited for the party. Lord Swallow and the Demon King Asura head towards the teleportation hub. After a while, they reach a massive gate. Swallow tells the guard he wants to go to the teleportation hub, and the guard says he still has a long way to go. Swallow questions how long, and the guard points out that they are just at the entrance now. He explains that the hub is right outside the Imperial Palace, to reach which, Swallow needs to pass 3 more castle walls. Swallow asks if it will take long, and the guard replies that if on foot, it will take at least a week. Hearing this, both Swallow and Asura are bewildered. Swallow knows that it will be too late by then and worries he won't find Renata, and Patrick will leave the dungeon. Asura suggests to Swallow that they use magic and fly to the hub. Swallow shows concern that if they use their mana, they will get noticed. At that moment, someone nearby asks Swallow and Asura if they are in trouble. A bald man comes, apologizing for eavesdropping, and asks if they plan to go to the teleportation hub. He introduces himself as the flying coachman Belver. Asura is alarmed hearing he is a flying coachman. Belver smiles and points to a carriage tied to a creature with wings. The creature is a 4th-generation homunculus, a result of the artificial angel manufacturing plan carried out by the Empire. Swallow seems interested while Asura shows disgust. Belver claims the creature is strong and can fly well but was abandoned by the Empire. Asura asks if the human's homunculus experimentation is over. Belver says there's still a rumor about homunculi being mass-produced through a large-scale process. Swallow asks if the process isn't usually carried out in giant flasks. Belver says that process was from ages ago for the 1st-generation homunculus incubation, about 150 years ago. Swallow is surprised, realizing it's already been 150 years since Renata was born. Asura examines the carriage and thinks it's alright and asks how long it will take to reach the hub in it. Belver claims it will take a total of 4 hours. Swallow asks for the price, and Belver says it will be 8 ounces of gold for the 2 of them. Hearing this high price, both Swallow and Asura are shocked. Asura claims she doesn't have that amount of money, and Swallow, examining his pocket, says neither does he. However, while rummaging his pockets, he hears a clinking sound and finds something encased in a piece of cloth. Wrapped in the cloth is a note from Patrick along with a few coins of gold. With that gold, Swallow and Asura get on their way to the hub in the flying carriage. On the way, Asura asks Swallow who gave him such an amount of money. Swallow says that an associate from the dungeon seems to have put the money secretly in his pockets. Asura asks Swallow if he is really from a dungeon. How is he able to go around so freely? Swallow claims he was kicked out. Asura asks him if the associate he is looking for also got kicked out, and Swallow says it's something like that. Asura says she is jealous seeing Swallow care for his associates so much and going to such lengths to find them. She expresses a desire to live a life like him, where there are people you care about surrounding you. Swallow acknowledges this longing of Asura and falls asleep. At the Streets of Gold and Pleasure Survey Rose. Upon reaching the destination, Swallow finds out they won't be able to use the teleportation hub. The man in charge of the hub apologizes for the inconvenience. Asura says she didn't think this would happen. The man suggests Swallow come back around 8 p.m. that day to access the hub and explains the hub is closed for an auction at the moment. He also notes that it's for safety as a rare item will be exhibited at the auction. He then hands a notice to Swallow where it says that the beheading fawn will be the item to be auctioned. Asura, looking at the notice, exclaims it's a well-made drawing while Swallow thinks he has seen the blade somewhere. Suddenly he remembers that the blade belonged to Renata. The man tells Swallow he must be mistaken, but Swallow is sure the blade is the same that Renata had. He also knows that only one beheading Fang exists in the world. He begins to think and ponder, unable to understand what's happening. A worry surrounds him as he fears what if Renata was captured by humans who then took the blade. He tries to assure himself that Renata is really strong, so humans couldn't have done anything to her. He then wonders if Renata was carrying the blade when she left. Recalling his memory, Swallow remembers that Renata was wearing frilly clothes with no place to hide weapons. So he concludes that when Renata left, she must have had no weapons. He also knows that Renata is not as strong as Patrick without any weapons. On top of that, Renata is called Blade Maid, and without any blades, it leaves her vulnerable. With all these thoughts playing inside his head, Swallow begins to lose control as he assumes Renata must have been killed by mere humans. Lord Swallow, thinking Renee was killed by humans, loses control in anger. The man, looking terrified, bellows at Swallow to stay back. However, grief-stricken, Swallow decides to kill every human there in revenge, slaying that man on the spot. His grief grows and his anger begins swallowing him while Asura tries to call him back to his senses. She pulls on the sleeves of Swallow, trying to calm him down. Sounding frightened, Asura asks Swallow what happened. Swallow, in a hollow voice, says he will ask Asura only one question. Turning his head to her, he asks Asura if it's correct that there's only one beheading Fang in the whole world. Asura says that as far as she knows, that's correct. Still confused, she asks Swallow why he is asking that all of a sudden, to which Swallow says that weapon belongs to his friend. He tells Asura he doesn't need her help anymore. Thanking her, he says he knows his way to Harston and will head there alone. Dark shadows and energy begin surrounding Swallow as he suggests Asura leave the place as soon as possible. Looking concerned, Asura shouts at Swallow, asking if the friend he means is the demon in the form of a silver-haired woman. Swallow suddenly stops, and his face shows a look of terrible fear as he growls thinking about Renee. Asura, noticing the reaction on Swallow's face, realizes she was right. Swallow warns Asura to stop provoking him and asks her how she knows about Renee. Asura laughs and says she is not scared of the vicious voice of Swallow. Smiling, she claims she has figured out who Swallow really is. Asura says that Lady Renee is the guardian that protects the great core of the ancient, and she is the highest of the highest. She assumes since Swallow is a friend to Renee, he must be related to the master of the core of the ancient, the great Lord Swallow. Swallow realizes he can't lie now and is about to reveal that he is Lord Swallow, but Agers interrupt him. She bellows out a laugh, saying Swallow must be an underling, causing him to give an annoyed look. She then begins to laugh, claiming she caught Swallow red-handed and that her deduction skills are supreme. She also says she knows dangerous thoughts are crossing Swallow's mind and offers to help him. Swallow points out that since Asura claims to be on the level of a demon king, she should go off such simple reasoning. Asura notes that it's not the logical demon who becomes king, but the demon king who dictates logic. Hearing this, Swallow sighs and thinks Asura is taking it a bit too far. Asura, noticing Swallow's look, says that's his true self she knows. She recalls that moments ago, Swallow was super scary with the dark, weird things shooting out of his back. She gives a relieved look, claiming she is glad Swallow is back to his normal self. She asks Swallow to promise her he won't lose control and use that scary voice ever again. The day of the auction has arrived, and many people are arriving through the front entrance. At that same time, at the back entrance, a guard is resting against the wall, surprised at seeing nobody there. At that moment, a voice greets him from the side. Demon King Asura, accompanied by Swallow, walks forward and asks the guard if they are in the right place to join the auction. Taken aback by their sudden appearance, the guard affirms it's the right way and asks them to identify themselves. Asura says she is from the house Asura and that Swallow is her attendant. The guard begins to check the list to see if their names are there. After a while, he says he doesn't see any Asura named on the list. Asura then asks Swallow if he has the invitation card they received. Swallow walks forward, saying he has it with him. Suddenly, he launches a powerful punch right at the guard's face. The guard falls backward on the ground as Swallow says that's the invitation to the guard's afterlife. Swallow turns to Asura, suggesting she should have worn something different, while Asura teases him about being afraid of her charm. Swallow reminds Asura she is a kid, so she should dress properly, causing her to fume in anger and warning him to take that back. At the Chait Castle, in the bed of one of the rooms, Renee is laying down, a tear trickling from her eyes, claiming she can't return to the core of the ancient. 80 years ago, in the Great Nia forest, which is in flames, a voice apologizes to his granny for what happened, claiming they didn't know humans would do such a thing. The person asks whether the forest won't leap with joy and recover in no time. The same person informs Great Nia the owner of Grape Nia Forest and the Earth Spirit, that he returned the favor to the humans. It's Lord Swallow, who notes that the core of the ancient has been using the forest as a natural fortress, emphasizing the need to impress Grape Nia. He has also killed all the humans who started the fire, hoping it will subside Grapenia's anger. He seems to be in a dilemma, wondering what to do with someone he found. It's actually Renee, a non-human creature made human through an experiment, and Swallow has just discovered her. He wonders if he should just kill her, as leaving any witnesses will be bad. But he decides against it and tells Renee she can leave freely if she wants. He makes it clear that he won't help her escape, and tearing the bars apart where Renee is locked in, tells her to decide whether to die trapped or go out. Meanwhile, Renee, who is confused, keeps staring at Swallow. Swallow claims a human was searching for a maid named Lello and thinks it must be Renee since no other is there. He walks away, saying he doesn't want anything to do with Renee. Renee slowly stands up and mutters the word Lello. Lello refers to the name of the maid who served the head of her household, and a title used to address the most talented maid. The current Lello was a middle-aged head maid, and Renee has never been called by that name before. The reason being, homunculus like Renee didn't have any names. Being addressed as Lello by Swallow, Renee was touched, on the verge of tears. At present, Renee is outside the Chait Castle, staring ahead lost in thoughts. Ursabet Bathory arrives there, informing Renee about the subjugation party headed towards the core of the ancient. Renee declares she won't return back to that dungeon despite whatever Bathory says. Bathory notes that she isn't telling Renee to go back and prioritizes choice and freedom. She suggests Renee prioritize settling all her problems. Also, she fears Swallow and Patrick will rampage if they discover Renee was tricked by humans and expects them to search everywhere for her. With this, Bathory tells Renee to erase all her tracks if she plans to live in the shadows. She points out that even if her actions are clumsy, Patrick will know her intentions and take care of it. Saying this, Bathory suggests if Renee plans to tie the knot, it has to be soon. Suddenly, Renee stands up and says she will go somewhere far away to get some fresh air. Bathory asks Renee if it will be okay for her to go alone. Renee claims she will be fine, thanking Bathory for her concern and asks the location of her blade, beheading Fong. Meanwhile, back at the auction, Swallow has a man held up by his throat as he asks him to tell him everything about the blade. The man, going purple in his face, groans that the blade was submitted for auction by the Magic Tower, Wing. Swallow, confirming this information, lets go of the man, and he walks away after Ajura. The man massages his throat and curses Swallow for bothering him as he is just a guard, claiming he did nothing wrong. Suddenly, Swallow turns back to the guard, his eyes blazing, and agrees that the guard is innocent. Swallow says the guard did no wrong but just happened to catch his attention. As dark tentacles emerge out of Swallow's back, he asks the man what they call it when someone steps into another's territory. Swallow reminds the guard that the word is raid or subjugation. His face turning in rage, he asks the guard if he ever feels sorry for the monsters his kind have killed in the dungeons. Saying this, Swallow says he doesn't care about humans either and they are his enemies, so he is doing all this. The auction has started and people are bidding for the beheading Fong, with the highest bid at 70 billion ounces of gold. The person conducting the auction asks if anyone wants to offer more than 70 billion. A girl in the crowd suggests bidding for fun, but another woman reminds her they are there for security. The first girl, who is named Wuan Historia, says she was just joking. The other woman, named Garrett, states they shouldn't forget their purpose and suggests they finish the task and go to eat. The man auctioning asks if anyone will make their bid, but no one speaks, so he decides to give a third call and end the auction. At that very moment, Swallow arrives there and instantly slaughters the auctioneer, causing a heavy uproar of screams. Swallow says he will end the auction. The security, Garrett and Historia, quickly get to their feet, ready to confront Swallow. Over at the front, Swallow, who has dark tentacles surrounding him, asks the people if they are there to buy the beheading Fong. In the Empire, there are 3 major warriors. After Burn's death in the core of the ancient, public criticism questioned how a protector could die there pursuing selfish interests. Unfortunately, the blame fell on the 2 other warriors since Burn couldn't be blamed. Out of the 2, Wu and Historia believed it crucial to instill trust in the Empire's people, suppressing their survival instinct and igniting their fighting spirit. And now seeing Lord Swallow invade the auction, Historia tries to confront him, but Garrett stops her. Looking frightened, Garrett warns Historia to not go in. Absolutely not. She senses that Swallow is too dangerous. Meanwhile, Swallow's eyes blaze as he eyes the blade and realizes it's actually Renee's. He is able to feel Renee's traces emanating from the blade. Filled with anger, he pushes the jar down, thinking the humans really killed her. Rage fills his heart as he snarls to the other people there that the blade already has an owner and says he will take it back back. The people in the crowd begin murmuring and pointing at Swallow, calling the guards to stop him. Swallow's anger rises, and dark energy surrounds him as he declares he will rip all their to pieces and bury them with Renee's blade. At that moment, Historia sprints towards Swallow, saying she won't allow him to do anything. Swallow swiftly turns towards Historia, who is charging at him, screaming out loud. He notes that Historia is quite fast with decent movement, but deems she has no talent for it, as he easily kicks her in the gut. Also, he sees that Historia has no weapons other than those gauntlets as she is sent backward with force. Historia removes her uniform and gets ready for combat while Swallow decides to rip the gear from her arms. Swallow raises his arm and gets ready as Historia launches a punch at him. He easily manages to grab Historia's hand and tries to pull it but can't. Historia applies more force and sends Swallow slamming into the wall with a crash. Having used overforce, Historia looks exhausted as she begins to huff and puff, sweating. Meanwhile, Swallow realizes that Historia isn't a normal person. Historia also notices that Swallow still isn't dead and is shocked. Concern replaces her face because she knows that her earlier attack is supposed to destroy most dungeon bosses. Not just that, even the high durability replica of the Apocalypse was once destroyed by a single hit from her technique. Historia finally realizes that Swallow isn't any ordinary monster either. She wonders who he might be. Swallow grins and takes pity on Historia. He launches an attack at her while she seems frozen with fear. Garrett screams for Historia and comes sprinting at her. Historia shouts back and warns Garrett to not get any closer, but Garrett doesn't listen as she raises her hand, electricity crackling from it. Later that evening, Adra asks Swallow, who is sitting down, if he is fine. He responds he is okay. Adra, looking concerned, says she thought Swallow died a helpless death. Swallow claims that the attack earlier from Historia isn't something any human could deliver. He is certain if that attack hit his head, his polymorph would have been undone. Moreover, he is afraid that if such a thing happened, Patrick would have scolded him to death. He reveals that those two heroes, Historia and Garrett, managed to escape his attacks. Garrett evacuated everyone while Swallow was occupied with Historia, ensuring multiple layers of protection for her and successfully evading Swallow's attacks. Learning of these skills from humans, Swallow finds it kind of interesting. Out of nowhere, something falls on the street with a deafening crash. This attracts the attention of people around who rush to see what fell. Historia seems to have fallen down, and a man notices she is injured and requests a healer. Historia is shaken by her defeat and a single strike, worrying about Garrett and the others' safety in the auction house. At that moment, Historia hears a familiar voice and, looking up, sees Garrett looking down at her. Historia is relieved to see Garrett is alive and safe. Garrett jokingly tells Historia to thank her for saving her life. But Historia's eye falls on Garrett's arm and sees it's been cut off. Wailing loudly, she embraces Garrett, apologizing and blaming herself for Garrett's injury. Garrett shouts at Historia to stop crying, reminding her she is a hero who gives hope to people. Garrett claims it's just one arm, which is nothing, and asks Historia if she knows who their opponent was. She explains that the monster was the core of Ancient Swallow. Hearing this, Historia tells Garrett to not joke about something like that, but Garrett says she is certain. She claims that the demon was really Swallow and explains she found traces of hero burn on the demon's foot. With a concerned look, Garrett says the situation is very serious. She believes if it continues, the Empire might fall. Historia, with an anxious note, says if it's really Swallow, they should make more efforts to stop him. However, Garrett tells Historia that they can't deal with Swallow with just strength. She suggests they go to the Demon Subjugation Coalition for more assistance and report to the Imperial family. She also claims she won't be able to teleport both of them in her condition, and, healing Historia, tells her to stay there and not roam around. As Garrett is about to depart, Historia mentions that they can't be sure when Swallow will rampage again. Garrett begins ascending feet off the ground and in an instant disappears into thin air. Meanwhile, Swallow is trying to decide whether he should go to Harston or follow those two girls and eliminate them. He moves in circles, forcing his mind to make a decision. In the end, he notes that since he already recovered the beheading Fong, he should focus on the important goal. He thinks he should at least find Renee's body, as he tells Adra to prepare to depart. Adra says okay in a gloomy tone, causing Swallow to ask if something is wrong. Adra quickly says nothing is wrong, but Swallow tells her to speak the truth, sensing something is bothering her. Ajura praises Swallow, saying he is stronger than she thought he was. Nervously, Ajura notes that Swallow is much stronger than Renee, and she asks Swallow to tell her who he really is. Swallow strokes his hair nervously and smacks lightly on Ajura's head, calling her a brat. He asks her why she is depressed at such a simple thing. He then says he is just Sir Swald. With a smile, he promises to tell the truth once everything is taken care of. With this, he suggests they finish things and tells Ajura to show her true power. Ajura removes the large cloak off her body and, holding her weapon, agrees to Swallow's request. Suddenly, a massive blinding wave of light fills the night sky coming off a certain part of the city. A massive explosion follows, sending smoke and dust everywhere. The people nearby hear and feel the explosion and are all puzzled. Historia recognizes that the explosion came from the place where the auction house is. The people begin running, seeing their houses are in flames, while Historia curses Swallow in anger. She wonders what she should do, remembering Garrett has told her to not go anywhere. She twitches her lips, feeling helpless. Suddenly, a hand grabs her hand from behind, startling her. Turning around, Historia sees a little kid shaking her hand, saying her dad needs help. So Historia decides to act and stands up, telling the people to not worry, claiming she will handle the situation. With this, she advances towards the explosion, saying she is a hero and won't avoid a monster. The huge explosion causes houses all around to fall into rubble. From the rubble, Swallow kicks his way out, asking Ajura what kind of magic she just used. Ajura claims she used the spell Reconstruction, a high-ranking magic that causes the ground to collapse. Hovering off the ground, she grins and asks Swallow what he thinks, while Swallow asks if she could have used something else. Annoyed, Ajura tells Swallow to not blame her, reminding him he suggested they finish things. She tells him he could have been clearer at the start, and Swallow says he trusted she would use her judgment. Right then, Swallow senses danger incoming. He asks Ajura if she knows the way to the hub, and Ajura says she remembers it. Swallow instructs her to quickly head over there and manage things before humans start flocking that way. Meanwhile, he says he will make arrangements to depart for Harston and then come to the hub to meet Ajura. Saying this, he walks away while Ajura asks where Harston is. Turning his head, Swallow asks Ajura if she knows where the core of the ancient is. Ajura claims she knows that, and Swallow says Harston town is closest to the core of the ancient. Ajura admits she only knows about the core of the ancient from reading books. Then she turns to leave, assuring Swallow to leave the hub to her protection. Swallow walks forward a few paces and senses people have arrived. He notices a large group straight ahead and wonders how many people must be there. The group of people are from the Langare house, one of the 9 pillars of the empire, the Langare Blue Crane subjugation team. A man with one injured eye at the front says he is the subjugation leader and asks Swallow who he is. Swallow notices that the group is getting into formation and wonders why humans do that. He admits he worried when he heard a lot of people were gathered around the auction house, but now realizes they were just soldiers. Swallow then threateningly asks the group leader if he really want to know his name. His eye begins blazing and dark shadows surround him as Swallow says he is the enemy to humans. At the same time, Nifrim has entered the core of the ancient while someone warns her of the dangers inside. A girl named Sylvia is teasing and trying to make Nifrim scared of the dungeon, causing Nifrim to tell her to not mess around. Sylvia, displeased by Nifrim's serious look, says she was just messing around. She looks all around and claims it's really strange. She points out that the first room they came through was full of monster corpses, but the second room is too clean. She says it's like someone just cleaned the room, and turning to other members asks what they think. The members also begin wondering why the room is clean as they start thinking if a monster really cleaned the room. Nifrim, however, says it's not possible as a fellow monster would never waste time cleaning other monsters' bodies. She bellows out, telling the monster if present to not play pranks on them. At this, a voice echoes from the darkness, complaining that Nifrim's voice is too loud. That voice claims he just cleaned up the room because it was looking untidy. Hearing this voice from the darkness, Nifrim tells Sylvia to produce light. Sylvia does as asked and creates a shining thing above her palms. Suddenly, the huge room gets splattered with light rays, revealing Patrick sitting down in the corner who welcomes the party. Nifrim sees Patrick and asks him if he is the Death Knight Patrick. Patrick marvels at hearing his own name and claims he was about to introduce himself and thanks Nifrim for assisting with that. Patrick then tells the party to calm down and suggests they put their weapons away, but no one reacts, and Patrick asks them if he said something weird. Suddenly, Nifrim charges at Patrick, bellowing loudly. Patrick reacts quickly and blocks the attack, saying Nifrim doesn't have any manners. At that same time, Sylvia uses magic and creates a massive structure from snow behind Nifrim while she charges down at Patrick, a dagger raised up. The snow slams down, shaking the cave. Patrick claims he knows the feeling of being one versus many. As he dodges Nifrim's attacks, Patrick shows confidence he will win. Nifrim continues the assault and finally, with a powerful blow, she knocks the sword off Patrick's hand. The sword lands a few feet away and Patrick realizes Nifrim's strength is too good for a human. Nifrim seems to have buffed her stats. Patrick reaches for his sword, realizing this, and notes that those buffs won't last long. Hoping he can last 1 minute longer, he gasps as he notices that Nifrim has even more buffs and looks concerned. Meanwhile, Nifrim steps on Patrick's body and asks him to repeat what he said about being victorious. She then pushes Patrick down with force, causing Patrick's skull to rattle as Patrick claims he didn't expect to get driven into a corner. He then looks over at Sylvia standing nearby, who has been buffing Nifrim's skills. Patrick thinks he should have gotten rid of Sylvia first. Suddenly, Nifrim applies more force and pushes Patrick down into the ground. She raises her blade, pointing it down at Patrick, telling him to die, which Patrick stops with just 2 fingers. Patrick gives a loud laugh, saying it was really fun. Nifrim's face turns to pure horror as she learns Patrick was just toying with her and acting weak. Patrick's eyes suddenly turn dark and begin glowing as he thanks everyone there for playing along with his rhythm. Nifrim gives a loud scream. She is sitting down while clutching her chest and asking what just happened. A voice notes that Nifrim is awake, causing her to turn and find Patrick sitting there. Patrick says he took care of Nifrim's friends and points sideways. Behind Patrick are the dead bodies of Nifrim's party, and Patrick claims he didn't let a single one survive. Patrick says Nifrim should have known about him but doesn't know anything else except the name. Nifrim notices Sylvia's body and, weeping, rushes towards her. Patrick stands up and says Sylvia was challenging to deal with due to her wide-range divine magic. Patrick informs Nifrim that Sylvia kept repeating her name until the very end. He mimics Sylvia's voice, repeating the words Nifrim a few times. Patrick further teases Nifrim, saying Sylvia called her, causing Nifrim's face to grow in rage. Patrick notices the changed expression on Nifrim's face and points out she is ruthless. He then pulls out the sword, saying he will ask some questions. He points the sword close to Nifrim's throat and asks what she is hiding. He tells her to raise her right hand if she is willing to answer and left hand if not. Nifrim raises her right hand, and Patrick says that's a wise choice, offering her a painless death if she answers honestly. However, Nifrim makes a middle finger gesture with her raised hand towards Patrick, causing him to raise his sword to kill her. He drives the long sword right into Nifrim's chest and walks away. Nifrim still mourns, bending over Sylvia's body while she bleeds away. Once Patrick is gone, Nifrim gazes down at Sylvia's face. She apologizes as she opens her huge mouth, revealing pointed teeth. With a desire to live, Nifrim begins chomping at Sylvia's flesh. Meanwhile, Patrick, who hasn't left and is peeking at Nifrim from the door, exclaims he knew something was wrong about Nifrim. He wonders if consuming flesh from human corpses strengthens Nifrim and promotes healing, and whether this ability accumulates over time. Patrick decides to watch to see what happens since there are many corpses lying around Nifrim. His thoughts then travel to Lord Swallow, wondering where he might be. He hopes that Swallow isn't doing anything weird or strange. Lord Swallow, meanwhile, is causing havoc in the city above, burning everything around. He notices Historia has come and asks her if she is there to die as well. Historia says she won't die, claiming she is the hero. Swallow states he doesn't care and warns Historia she can't beat him. However, Historia, despite knowing that, decides to give it a try and stop Swallow. Without waiting, she charges towards Swallow. Swallow easily blocks her punch and sighs. He doesn't want to let Historia escape, knowing she will attack him again, so he challenges her to try and escape if she can. Swallow slams Historia into the ground, her yell and blood indicating she hopes to buy time for others to escape, fulfilling her duty. Next moment, Swallow grabs onto Historia's arm and lifts her off the ground. Despite being beaten and bloody, Historia mutters that she is a hero and can't be defeated. She groans that she won't let Swallow get to her people. Saying this, she pulls back her free arm and prepares a punch. She punches Swallow, but it makes no impact. And finally, Swallow lets go of her, congratulating her for not dying in vain. As Historia falls to the ground, Swallow promises to remember her name as long as he can. He says he will give her a painless death out of respect for her perseverance. However, at that moment, something strikes Swallow from behind. Swallow turns around and sees a bunch of guards, irritated that they keep on coming no matter how many he kills. A voice among the men says they attack Swallow from behind so they could protect Historia and asks for his forgiveness. A man steps forward, introducing himself as Arl Ethelbria's Gal Livison, a member of the Ethelbria's Black Tiger Order, and says he is honored to meet Swallow. Being addressed directly by Ethelbria's, Swallow asks asks him how he knows him. Ethelbrius claims he has someone under his command who recognized Swallow. Swallow says he's in a bad mood and warns Ethelbrius that he's wasting his time, telling him to attack quickly if he plans to. However, Ethelbrius states he has no intention of fighting Swallow and instead offers a deal. Swallow snarls that he's not interested in a deal when he has nothing to regret. Growing angrier, he warns Ethelbrius to think carefully, threatening that stepping out of line won't earn him an easy death. Meanwhile, Ethelbrius realizes his next move is a gamble as he informs Swallow that the owner of the beheading fang is still alive. He points out that Lord Swallow desires more than just the virtuous masterpiece and offers to help him fulfill his desires. Walking forward, Swallow asks Ethelbrius what he'll do if he doesn't want any help. Swallow asks what if he came to retrieve the beheading fang out of boredom and plans to exterminate all humans. With his face inches from Ethelbrius's, Swallow questions what he'll do then. Ethelbrius claims it's always worth trying, prompting Swallow to ask if he wants to avoid destruction, and he instructs Ethelbrius to find the owner of the beheading fang if he wants peace. Ethelbrius agrees to Swallow's request and calls out to Garrett, pointing Swallow has met her before. Garrett explains that to locate someone, she needs to analyze traces they've left on objects, asking if she can analyze the beheading fang. Swallow warns Garrett not to do anything stupid as he pulls out the blade. He extends it towards Garrett, who assures him she understands. Garrett examines the blade and senses overwhelming traces left by someone moving away from the Imperial Palace. Swallow realizes Renee is moving towards Harston. With relief, he exclaims that she's still alive. He sighs heavily and tells Ethelbrius and Garrett that he owes them. With that, he walks away. Later, Swallow finds Asura standing amidst countless corpses, who remarks that Swallow is late. Swallow is silent for a moment as he looks around. With a proud smile, Asura says she kept her promise and defended the teleportation hub. She claims she has now repaid the favor owed to Swallow. At that moment, she passes out, and Swallow acknowledges her effort by grabbing her with the tentacles. He then turns towards the teleportation hub, contemplating how to use it. Setting the coordinates for Harston, he begins infusing his mana but notices a crack appearing on the hub. Suddenly, the glass shatters, splattering liquid everywhere. Puzzled, Swallow realizes the hub couldn't withstand his mana. He considers using Demira's mana suppression function to successfully teleport, but doing so requires him to undo his polymorph, revealing his identity to the world. Realizing he's already made enough mistakes, he decides to undo the polymorph and proceed. And he removes the bracelet given by Patrick. As his polymorphism begins to undo, he begins transforming into his monstrous self, causing the building to crumble under his immense size. Once the polymorph is reversed, Swallow sets the coordinates for Harston, Magic Tower Wing, and teleports. Meanwhile, at the Magic Tower Wing, the greeter welcomes Renee to the tower. Renee, looking grim, asks if she can use transfer magic there. The greeter explains the tower is surrounded by resistance magic, preventing unauthorized teleportation. Renee withdraws 3 blades, fixing them between her fingers, and declares that no one will escape. With those words, she kills the greeter. She recalls how the tower reminded her of the dungeons when she first arrived and now realizes it's a dungeon made up of humans. Beginning her killing spree, she cuts down anyone in sight, viewing them as weak monsters. Covered in blood, Renee ascends the stairs after clearing the first floor. She heads toward the top floor of the tower. At the top floor, Gromit's armor awaits, grinning upon seeing Renee as her opponent. She realizes Renee isn't a human or noble as she previously assumed. Renee asks Gromit's where the beheading fang is. Gromit's claims the blade is her property and says there's no point in telling Renee its location. She then questions how Renee is still alive. Seeing Renee, Gromit's armor asks her how she is still alive. Renee gets ready to confront Gromit's, revealing her blades. Gromit's mocks Renee, saying her cute face doesn't match with her weapons. She produces a massive shield, telling Renee she can't defeat her. She further provokes Renee, but suddenly her defensive shield gets shattered. Seeing this, Gromit's is bewildered, realizing Renee isn't as ordinary and weak as she thought. She still hopes to win by utilizing all the mana that the magic tower holds below it. Renee asks Gromit's the location of the beheading fang, warning her to answer quickly. Gromit's raises her staff and shrieks that it's not there and was sent to an auction long ago. Saying this, she summons a massive disc a few feet above, which shoots lightning at Renee. Gromit's notes Renee's impressive strength and claims she'll go all out from the start, and she throws spell after spell at Renee, daring her to pierce through them. A huge outburst causes half of the top floor of the magic tower to crumble. As the dust and smoke clear, Renee's body is revealed to be pierced by half a dozen sharp light spears as she coughs blood. Grinning, Gromitz reveals that she used top-class magic which Renee cannot handle. However, she receives a shock when suddenly both of her hands get blown into pieces. She groans in pain and asks what happened to her hands. Renee, standing over the kneeling Gromitz, says she cut her hands off. Gromitz begins wailing, begging Renee not to let her die. She yells out loud, and as Renee pushes her down, she pleads for Renee to save her. Renee accepts that it's over as her behating Fang is forever lost and wonders what to do next. She walks forward with difficulty, asking what's left for her now. Her body feels tired, as if she might collapse right there. At that moment, a man runs towards Gromitz, calling her leader, and asks what happened. He tells Gromitz to hold on while Gromitz mutters in pain. Gromitz tells the man to kill Renee. The man instructs Gromitz to calm herself, pointing out she has lost too much blood, and withdraws a crystal. Gromitz says she can't see clearly what the man is holding. The man explains it's a mana stone that allows anyone to escape from the tower, telling Gromitz to imbue it with her mana. Meanwhile, Renee gets an unpleasant feeling seeing the mana stone, similar to what she felt from the love stone. The man brings the mana stone closer to Gromitz's face, causing her eyes to go blank. Suddenly, Gromitz feels unbearable pain in her body and screams loudly. And just like that, Gromitz dies, while the man stands up and remarks that Gromitz had too many enemies. He claims even Gromitz's family was against her and gave orders to get rid of her. Turning his eye to Renee, he asks if that's right. The man expresses gratitude towards Renee for doing his job, but he believes Renee will come after him as well, beginning to transform into his real form to eliminate Renee. Within seconds, he turns into a huge, ugly-looking monster. Renee realizes she can't battle with the monster in her tired state and without proper weapons. Despite this, she thinks it will be enough and calls the monster pathetic. In some way, Renee is ready to die and erase any traces of herself, but the thought of Lord Swallow keeps her motivated. She screams loudly, warning the monster not to dare cover Lord Swallow's scent on her, even if she dies. With this determination, she lunges at the monster and pierces her blade through its eye, causing it to shriek in pain. The monster uses its tentacle to slam Renee. Renee is sent flying backward, wondering if Lord Swallow would be sad to find her dead. At that very moment, Lord Swallow teleports there and grabs onto Renee, asking her if she is okay. This situation is very similar to how Swallow had saved Renee for the first time. Long ago, when Renee's body and mind were weak and near death, Lord Swallow had appeared before her and held her, much like he is doing now. Lord Swallow catches Renee in midair to stop her from falling. Renee is totally taken aback seeing Swallow as he gently puts her down. Swallow tells her to wait there for him and turns to walk away while Renee wonders if she is dreaming. Swallow walks towards the monster, filled with rage for it hurting Renee. His face turns scary with fangs as he lunges towards the monster. His punch pierces the monster's body, coming out the other side. The monster shrieks in pain. However, it begins regenerating its wound, puzzling Swallow. So, Swallow grabs the monster, raises it above, and slams it down on the ground with force. Due to the impact, the monster's body becomes dismembered. Swallow lifts the monster's head and sees it beginning to regenerate again. Swallow clicks his tongue in annoyance and, noting it's disgusting, uses his mana to launch a powerful blow at the monster, causing a small explosion. The monster's blue-colored blood splatters everywhere. With his hand dripping, Swallow realizes how the monster keeps regenerating. The monster is already regenerating, and Swallow claims it's using the magic tower's mana as a power source. To end the monster's regeneration, Swallow reveals his true form, opens his massive mouth wide, and chomps down on the monster in one go. With this, he walks away, complaining that it tastes bad. He moves towards Renee, who is still sitting down with her head bowed. Swallow sits beside Renee and says he wanted to say a lot of things to her, but now that she is near, his mind is completely blank. He also mentions he met a green-haired human on his way and asks if it's a problem since he killed her. Renee stays silent. Swallow wholeheartedly apologizes to her for his actions a few days ago, causing Renee's eyes to tear up. She finally speaks, telling Swallow he doesn't need to apologize, apologizing herself, and admitting she has no right to face him. Swallow reminds her that the core of the Ancient needs her, and he needs her as well. Renee asks Swallow if he isn't resentful of her, but Swallow denies this. Renee again asks Swallow if he hates her, which Swallow denies as well. Swallow says he has something for Renee. From inside his robes, he brings out the beheading Fang, offering it to her. Renee is startled seeing her weapon and begins to sob harder. Sparkling tears roll down her face, and wailing more, She says she was scared of being abandoned and hated by Swallow. Swallow makes it clear he will never abandon nor hate Renee. He extends his hand and asks Renee to go back to the core of the Ancient with him. Years ago, when Swallow first brought Renee to the core of the Ancient, he explained to Patrick that he had met Renee again in the lab. After meeting her twice, Swallow thought it was fate, so he let her tag along with him. Patrick notes that Renee is completely unfazed inside the room of the strongest boss, believing she has the mental and physical strength to handle anything. He asks Swallow what he will do with her. Swallow says he will let her live in the core of the Ancient and teach her to fight. If she doesn't like to fight, Swallow suggests they will let her live in peace and maybe let her do the cooking. Patrick, looking unsure, asks Swallow if he is being serious and questions who will educate Renee. Swallow points to Patrick, implying he will teach her. Patrick asks why him, and Swallow tells him to be considerate, pointing out he has nothing else to do, so he should help Renee learn. Patrick, believing Renee's abilities as a homunculus will be outstanding, wonders if she still resents humans and asks Swallow what her name will be. Swallow tries to remember Renee's name, claiming he heard it before when he met her. At that moment, Renee begins to mutter something and barely puts together the word Lello. Hearing this, Patrick asks if her name is Lello and suggests Swallow give her a new name. Swallow considers this and begins to look for a name. After thinking for a moment, he decides to name her Renee, and this is how she got her name. Patrick exclaims that's a good name, realizing Swallow has fallen asleep again. He then turns to Renee and tells her they will begin her education by teaching her to smile. Now at present, Lord Swallow has finally returned to the core of the Ancient and is instantly welcomed with scoldings from Patrick for his actions at Harston. Swallow begins to sweat with worry as Patrick continues calling him out for causing havoc in the village. Patrick notices Swallow carrying the Demon King, Asura, who is in her child form, and asks about it. He asks Swallow if he kidnapped the child, but Swallow denies doing anything like that. Patrick questions Swallow about where Renee is and why he brought the strange kid instead. Swallow begins to explain, saying he met Renee at a human village. Patrick asks if Renee was injured, and Swallow says she looked tired. Swallow then assumes they were probably limiting and restricting Renee's life. However, Patrick clarifies that isn't the case and suggests Swallow admit the truth if he was rejected by Renee. Swallow suggests that Patrick will have to put on a maid costume and manage the dungeons, leading Patrick to promptly bring out his resignation letter. Patrick asks Swallow what he will do now, and Swallow says there's nothing else to do but wait since they don't know when Renee will return. Patrick admits he understands. He walks away, thinking it's best to leave Swallow alone for the time being, but he stops shortly and calls out to Swallow. He says someone is there, and Swallow, waking up, asks who it is. It's Renee, who is smiling as she asks Swallow if he has eaten and offers to cook if not. Patrick notices that one of Renee's eyes is different and, looking back at Swallow, he sees he has an eye missing. Patrick is unable to believe that Swallow actually sacrificed his own eye for Renee and wonders if he had been sane while doing that. Flashback, hours earlier, when Swallow saved Renee, he found out that her right eye was completely ruined. Swallow then plucked his own eye and gave it to Renee, telling her to give him a Real Love Stone next time. Back to present. Now, Renee's both eyes are well, and she is smiling, having accepted to always be with Lord Swallow. Water droplets from the dungeon's ceiling fall onto Asura's face while she is asleep. She wakes up with a start, rubbing her eyes, wondering where she is. In front of her, she sees Patrick and is startled. Looking scared, Asura asks if she is dead and if Patrick is the Grim Reaper, but Patrick assures her she isn't dead. He tells Asura that it's the core of the Ancient, causing her to shriek with excitement. She then points to Patrick, asking if he is really Patrick. Patrick stands up and, turning around, hopes Swallow will wake up quickly. Impatiently, he walks forward and kicks Swallow, shouting at him to get up. Swallow howls in pain, stands up, and mutters he was having a nice dream as he sees Asura is awake. Meanwhile, seeing Swallow, Asura is confounded as she bows down on the ground and pays her respect to him. Still dazed being in the presence of Swallow, Asura introduces herself while Swallow giggles in silence and repeats the full information of Asura to her. Shocked again, Asura asks Swallow how he knows about her, and Swallow says he already memorized it. Asura asks if Swald told him all the information. She looks around, asking where Swald is, and finally, Swallow admits the truth that he is Swald. Taken aback, Asura tells Swallow to repeat what he said. Swallow sincerely accepts he is Swald. Hearing this, Asura falls silent for a moment, then begins to sweat and becomes embarrassed for the way she acted before in front of Swallow. Patrick calls out to Swallow and mentions what Asura said about punishing the humans in Liaise, and, with a death stare, asks Swallow if he is hiding something. Being called out, Swallow sweats anxiously. At Great Nia Forest, in Harston territory border, a person walking along the forest laughs, seeing something. He says that he was told not to enter the place but seems to have done it anyway and hasn't found anything strange there. Suddenly, a little farther, he notices a disturbance and is startled. It's a body of a person lying on its back, badly injured. The man rushes to the aid of the injured, taking out herbs. Suddenly, the injured person, who is Nifrim, gets up, snarling with bared teeth, and begins chomping down on the man. And she walks forward, towards huge walls, claiming she needs to go. The dungeon is simply a battlefield to survive, which requires possessing several virtues, one of them being maintaining a minimum level of tension. Renee reminds Asura that silence is a basic rule in Lord Swallow's room, making a gesture for her to be quiet. However, Asura bellows out that she refuses to remain silent, claiming she is a free dungeon monster. Asura wants to talk to him, but Renee insists he is resting and refuses Asura entry. Asura argues that Swallow needs her by his side so she can share her warmth and help him sleep comfortably. Smirking, Asura points out that Renee is too conservative and inflexible, like a boomer. Renee's face shows pure rage at being called a boomer. She runs after Asura to hit her while Asura runs away, teasing and laughing. Renee shouts at Asura to come back while Asura, still laughing, flees away. Meanwhile, Patrick seems fed up with the noise made by the two girls. Lord Swallow, also annoyed with the noise, complains he can't sleep, prompting Patrick to remind him of the chaos he has caused outside and says he shouldn't complain. Swallow asks if the situation outside is really that bad. Patrick explains that the Empire has sent all troops to strengthen Lia's defense, which has caused nearby villages to be overrun with monsters. On top of that, the Lord of Harston seems to have killed himself, causing Harston to be completely paralyzed. Patrick claims he has searched through all the recent newspapers but found only 3 articles related to Harston. He asks Swallow if he knows what that means, to which Swallow replies he doesn't. Sounding annoyed, Patrick tells Swallow to think before he speaks and warns he will hand Swallow his resignation letter otherwise, causing Swallow to apologize in alarm. Swallow asks Patrick what he thinks, and Patrick says he is not sure as he has no more information. Patrick believes that Harston might have been cut off from all interactions with the outside and calls out Swallow for doing so much damage to that place. Patrick points out that if a village that suffered such catastrophic damage has no recent news, it's not a good sign. He also claims that the core of the Ancient needs Harston as it allows them to keep an eye on the size of the subjugation party heading towards them. Saying this, Patrick suggests they rush to Harston to find out what is happening there. Swallow tells Patrick to go alone and find out, then goes back to sleep. Patrick doesn't argue back and silently departs for Harston, saying he will come back soon. Meanwhile, Swallow is surprised that Patrick agreed to his suggestion so easily. But Patrick stops a little way off and says it will be difficult for him to go alone and he needs a companion. Swallow, who doesn't want to go, considers sending Asura to accompany Patrick. But he knows Asura is short-tempered and worries if she uses any of her magic as she did last time, Harston will be wiped out. Renee volunteers to go with Patrick. Swallow doesn't want Renee to go either, as he barely got her back when she ran off. Patrick suggests that Swallow should accompany him as there's no other option. Swallow realizes that he is trapped and has no choice, so he admits that he would like to accompany Patrick but claims he can't polymorph as he broke the bracelet. Patrick notes that it's true Swallow can't come with him without his bracelet. Swallow looks excited, thinking he won't have to go now. But to his horror, Patrick hands him another bracelet, and he curses Patrick, looking irritated. Patrick reminds Swallow that he is dead, so cursing is pointless. He points out that Swallow said he couldn't go because he didn't have the Demira bracelet, which means he would go if he had it. With this, both Swallow and Patrick head for Harston Village. Once they arrive at the village gate, Patrick sees the damage caused by Swallow. He then claims that there are 4 ways to see how active a human village is. The first is to see how crowded the market is, and upon inspection, they realize that it is dead empty. The second way is to check the smoke coming from the chimneys of houses, but Patrick points out that it's already past dinner time, so this method is useless. The third method is to see how many mercenaries and subjugation parties are at the subjugation request board, but Harston doesn't have one, so it's of no use. Lastly, the final method is to check the inns and pubs. Hearing the words inns and pubs, Swallow becomes fully active and moves ahead, calling Patrick to follow him. Both of them go to the nearest inn, and Swallow forces the doors open, looking cheerful. Once they look inside the inn, both are shocked at its condition. Meanwhile, outside, all the corpses of people begin coming to life. A man standing in the middle of the corpses says everyone has worked hard. He says that once they rummage through Harston, they will go to the capital, Liège, and strike while the humans are weakened, intending to destroy the whole empire. He laughs, showing his bony face and sharp teeth. Patrick notes the seriousness of the situation, seeing the inn completely empty and believes Harston is completely isolated. At that moment, a voice asks Patrick who J.E. is. A man walks in, claiming he is the owner of the inn. He seems to be holding a weapon as he asks Patrick why he is there. Patrick says that he is a knight of a subjugation team, and he requests a place to sleep and a meal. The inn owner becomes relieved, realizing Patrick is just a customer. Then he says that he has no food to serve a knight and claims that not just his inn, but nowhere in the village is available to eat and rest. Patrick asks if that's because of the Black Calamity. The inn owner apologizes and says there isn't even a room ready and hopes Patrick will understand. Patrick knows that in a situation like this, even water will be more expensive than the cost of lodging. So he flings a gold coin to the inn owner and once again asks if there are any rooms ready. This time, the owner bows and instructs Patrick to go up the stairs. At that moment, the inn owner notices Swallow walking behind Patrick and asks who he is. Patrick lies that Swallow is his slave. Patrick explains that despite being his slave, Swallow helps him a great deal, so Patrick says he is treating his slave. A minute later, Swallow and Patrick enter a room, and Swallow, looking around, exclaims the room is better than he thought. He jumps down on the soft bed, looking content and satisfied. Patrick also accepts that the room is good, while Swallow asks him if slave was the only excuse he could come up with. Patrick admits that it was the only option and points out that with the shabby clothes Swallow is wearing, he does look like a beggar. Patrick further explains that everyone seeks a fight with a beggar but not with a slave, as a slave is someone's property, so that's why he lied that Swallow is his slave. Patrick asks Swallow if it isn't his hobby to move as little as possible. Swallow, with an annoyed look, affirms this and reveals that in his next life, he will be reborn as a rock. Patrick then suggests Swallow listen to what he says as he walks out, claiming he will be back soon. Before leaving, Patrick assures Swallow not to worry about him. Patrick believes the Black Calamity struck Harston because the imperial family needed a scapegoat for their failures in subjugating the core of the ancient. He climbs atop the tallest building and sees that Swallow has indeed caused massive destruction in Harston. He had heard that the Lord of Harston died before the imperial hand could extend its reach, and he wonders who the new lord might be. It's obvious that the royal family lost their chance and would direct their anger at the family, causing Patrick to think if Count Atark's descendants really inherited the title. Standing on top of Lord Harston's castle, Swallow decides to go and take a look at the new lord's face. Before moving down, he notices a lot of guards and realizes the security is really tough. He doesn't want to kill or knock the guards unconscious, as it would mean more trouble when the sun rises. So he walks away, believing it's wise not to rush. He reveals he had a specific place in mind when he came to the lord's castle, but now he senses something humans are unable to perceive. The scent he is sensing is a strong lingering scent of corpses, following which he reaches a stair leading downwards into the underground room. Meanwhile, at this time, Swallow is laying down in his comfortable bed in the inn. As he is about to fall asleep, a knocking on the door alarms him. A voice from outside asks for the knight Patrick, banging on the door. Swallow answers the door and informs the inn owner that his master has gone out for a walk. The owner says the meal is ready and claims serving his customers is his duty, asking Swallow to follow him down. Saying this, he introduces himself as Novin Hedeker and says Swallow can call him Mr. Novin. Swallow pursues Mr. Novin, who warns him not to expect a variety of food due to the calamity in Harston. Mr. Novin explains that the calamity was really bad, as most of the residents immediately lost their minds when they saw it. After that incident, the Lord of Harston committed suicide. With the Lord's death, all traffic to Harston was cut off, while beyond the castle walls, the corpses of the starved line the streets. Mr. Novin says he is surprised to see Patrick and Swallow come to Harston, as he reveals he will also leave the village soon. Swallow follows Mr. Novin down the stairs, who claims Swallow must know what happens to a person when they are cornered. At that moment, a red-haired girl appears on the windowsill high above. Once Lord Swallow has gone for the meal, a girl with red hair jumps down from the window inside the room. She grins, looking excited. She knows that Swallow and Patrick are outsiders and chose to stay in the village's most expensive room, so she is confident they must have a lot of money. She decides to take everything of value from the room. While searching, she picks up Swallow's coat and closes her nose as it stinks. Despite that, she chooses to hold on to the coat, planning to use them instead of a bindle. She continues searching and finds the chest empty, and looking worried, she wonders if those two took everything and left. She then pulls out a drawer and this time sees something inside. As she realizes what's inside, her eyes widen in shock. Moments later, Patrick returns to the inn, and entering the room, sees Swallow laying down and asks what he has been doing. Patrick sighs and says he went to see the new lord but couldn't due to tighter security. He asks Swallow if he discovered anything. Swallow explains that Harston has been cut off from the outside world and even the inn owner knows nothing more than that. Patrick gives a shocked reaction, saying he is surprised Swallow actually did some tasks. Patrick then suggests that the next day they do more investigation on the condition of Harston. He notices that 2 windows are open, whereas when he left, only one was open, and he warns Swallow to be careful of robbery. But Swallow claims he didn't even touch the windows. Patrick tells Swallow not to joke as it's not like wind could have opened the window and asks if a ghost must have done it. Swallow covers his ears with the pillow, irritated with Patrick's talks. Some moments later, Swallow tries to find his coat but sees that it's missing. Patrick, also checking the drawer, exclaims that his thing is gone as well. Swallow asks Patrick what was stolen. Looking in despair, Patrick says it was his rib. Meanwhile, the red-haired thief is sprinting away out in the streets. Sweating and exhausted, she stops, thinking it will be far enough. Suddenly, someone walks in front of the thief, calling her Rosalina. It's a man, who asks her where she has been out so late. He reminds her he had told her not to wander in the dark. Rosalina claims she had gone out for the sake of others, not for personal reasons. The man, looking angry, says it's pointless wasting her energy and becoming even hungrier for no reason. At that moment, another person enters, telling the man not to be harsh, calling him Toth. Rosalina turns sideways and sees it's the boss. The boss, dragging a chair, says thieves shouldn't fear the dark and that isn't something to get angry over. But he also points out that wandering around without informing others is a mistake. The boss tells Rosalina to think about others before acting, as her actions can bring harm to them. He then sits down on the chair and claims the place is different from the old house that embraced Rosalina. Rosalina accepts her mistake as the boss asks her what she did. Rosalina puts the things she stole on the ground for the boss to see, and the boss asks her if she stole it, which she affirms she did. The boss inspects the items and asks Rosalina where she got them from, and Rosalina says from the inn. Rosalina mentions she stole the rib from an expensive room where it was stored in a drawer and believes it must be expensive. Meanwhile, the boss, looking annoyed, says the thing is a rib of a human. Looking shocked, Rosalina bellows out that she didn't know it was that while Toth asks her if she robbed a grave. The boss points out that Rosalina didn't rob a grave, or else she wouldn't show it so proudly. The boss thinks the rib must be used by someone for magic purposes as Rosalina asks if he knows anyone who collects ribs. The boss says the world is overflowing with rotten people who use limbs to make ornaments. He also explains that if the rib belonged to those who studied black magic, then it must be very dangerous. His suspicion grows, and as he looks at the coat, he is sure it must belong to a beggar. While inspecting the coat, he notices the fabric is of very high quality. Also, the coat's pocket makes a jingling sound. The boss empties the pocket and, to his and others' shock, finds a handful of gold coins. While the two are excited, the boss shouts at them not to be happy. Rosalina says she robbed the right people, but the boss thinks it's weird for customers to stay at an inn in a crumbling village and thinks he should have noticed it sooner. His mind starts racing as he thinks about the human's rib as well as clothing made from luxury fabric, and he believes they have messed up with the wrong people. At that very moment, Swallow and Patrick arrive, declaring they are there to collect their things back. Lord Swallow and Patrick confront the thieves who stole their things. Swallow sees that his coat is in good order and is relieved. Patrick asks Swallow if that coat is the one Renee gifted him. Swallow was worried that Renee would be upset if the coat was damaged, but is thankful it's fine. The boss orders the two behind him to stay still. He then asks Swallow how he found them. Patrick claims their items were yearning for them while Swallow suggests they finish the task and go rest. Patrick decides to allow Swallow's laziness as earlier he had done some research. He speaks to the boss, warning him that he messed with the wrong people and politely demands the return of the stolen items. The boss is surprised that Swallow and Patrick found them so easily despite the dark, and he is certain those two are monsters. So he wonders if the rib Rosalina is holding is black magic. He asks the two if they are beings who live in the dark, and Patrick says their cave is indeed dark. The boss asks if the rib is important, and Patrick notes that it's his rib, so it's important. Realizing the rib is very important to Patrick, the boss grins, thinking he has an advantage, and he makes the rib fly high up in the sky, startling Patrick. The boss orders Rosalina and Toth to go and evacuate everyone. As the rib begins to fall down, Patrick, shouting, sprints forward. At the last moment, he manages to grab the rib. Suddenly, from the dark, someone jumps down at Patrick, smacking a powerful punch on his head. The attack does no damage to Patrick's face armor, seeing which the attacker is bewildered. Meanwhile, Swallow gives a loud yawn and, hearing the loud noise, says the situation there must be bad. Unknown to him, an unknown man tries to stab him from behind, which Swallow blocks with his bare hand. He then grabs onto that man's throat and lifts him off his feet. Patrick suggests they knock out all the attackers, causing Swallow to ask him if he wants to let the attackers live. Patrick suggests they finish the fight quickly, while Swallow claims he is tired and might not be able to control his strength. And so both of them begin beating the crap out of everyone there. Meanwhile, back in the core of the Ancient, Renee and Adjura are seated at a table discussing how Swallow must be doing. Renee assumes everything must be going well and asks if it's okay for them to rest while Swallow is busy. Adjura points out Renee is worrying too much. Renee realizes she is over-fussing and assures herself that Patrick and Swallow would never struggle in a mere human village. Adjura notes that Swallow and Patrick are also monsters who stand at the peak of all things. Back in the village, Patrick and Swallow have beaten everyone and taken their stolen things back. Patrick says that he expected the thieves to have a map but didn't find it with them and suggests they deal with the situation quickly. Patrick turns towards Swallow and sees that he has already lain down on his back, prompting Patrick to do the same. At that moment, Rosalina walks in, scared-looking and apologizing, admitting she was the one who stole. She then gets on her knees and begs, saying the others had nothing to do with her actions. Toph tells Rosalina to get up and reminds he that Patrick and Swallow won't let them go anyway. Swallow notes that the cat's out of the bag and tells Patrick to go and deal with those two. Heeding the orders, Patrick walks towards Rosalina and Toph. Toph bravely pulls out a blade and warns Patrick not to get closer. Rosalina also holds onto a carved wooden symbol and begins praying. Patrick notices that item and walks towards Rosalina, and he asks her where she got that thing from. Patrick finds out that the mana flowing from the thing is surveillance mana. He is surprised to see Rosalina, who is among the poor, is able to radiate surveillance mana. He then calls for Swallow and informs him that the residents of Harston are being watched by someone else. When Rosalina prayed holding onto the artifact called Rosary, it released surveillance mana, so Patrick assumes it activates under certain conditions. He believes if they discover those conditions, they will then be able to find out what the owner of the Rosary is scheming. Swallow points out that Harston isn't even a village of magic, but last time it was the Mana Stones, and now it's an item imbued with magic. Patrick claims they will need to work with humans and tells Swallow to cooperate, prompting Swallow to ask him what his plans are. Patrick points out that he has thought of an amazing solution. Patrick apologizes for his and Swallow's actions earlier. He claims they attacked due to a royal decree to leave no traces of those who opposed them, not because of the stolen items. Patrick then lies that he and Swallow are from a secret organization that takes orders from the Empire's royalty. Looking shocked, Toph asks if it's true, and Patrick affirms, pointing out that he and Swallow don't want to cause harm to anyone. Toph asks why they are staying in Haston, and Patrick says they are there to save Haston. He explains that he is going against the royal decree and sparing the people so he can ask them for information. Patrick also mentions that he will analyze the situation to request necessary supplies and manpower for Haston. Saying this, he asks the opinion of the people whether they will coordinate with them. All the people then begin discussing together to draw a decision. A while later, they all decide to help Patrick and Swallow. Meanwhile, Patrick realizes he has managed to persuade the humans while Swallow asks if they can go back now. But Patrick responds they are just starting. Swallow appreciates Patrick for trying hard, but he feels like things have gotten more problematic. And with that, he lies down on the ground, murmuring something. Patrick tells Swallow to get up, asserting they will have to start working hard now. Annoyed, Swallow claims Patrick is getting strangely fired up and asks if he can't do it on his own. Patrick then offers to watch the suspicious captain and tells Swallow to stay with the people and get close to them. Alarmed, Swallow asks Patrick if he really wants him to get close to humans. Patrick explains they have no choice and claims Swallow, dressed as a beggar, will have an easier time associating with people than him, a knight. He also suggests Swallow get close to people by following their activities until he returns. Meanwhile, Swallow begins to wonder what humans do. He believes humans spend most of the day sleeping and those who are awake are in a daze, half-assing their work, and he becomes cheerful as he realizes he has always been acting like humans do. Patrick reminds Swallow to investigate the religion that passed out the rosaries as well. Lastly, Patrick tells Swallow to keep his composure despite any rudeness from humans, noting that being close to them won't be easy. Once Patrick leaves, the people start swarming around Swallow, asking him different questions. They also ask him why Patrick has armor on but he is dressed like a beggar. Swallow becomes overloaded with these questions and sits down with his head in his hands. His facial expression is troubled as he realizes he will have a difficult time getting closer to the humans. He becomes so frustrated that, given a chance, he would devour them all. But he has orders from Patrick to get close to them, so he tries to calm himself down. A little girl pulls on Swallow's coat, asking if he has ever seen Sir Vern and Sir Woon, to which Swallow says he doesn't know them. At that moment, Rosalina calls out to Swallow and apologizes for stealing from him. Swallow says it's fine as he already got his things back. Toth introduces himself and claims the boss put him in charge, saying he will fulfill Swallow's every need. Toth tells Swallow that since he has come to save Haston, it will be better if he sees the whole village with his own eyes. And he offers to guide Swallow, causing Swallow to sweat nervously. Swallow decides to follow Toth so he won't be bombarded with questions if he stays there. Toth takes Swallow to the residential area, and Swallow asks why it's all empty. Toth says Swallow will know soon as he pushes open the door of a house. Inside the house are two people who have starved to death. Toth explains that people there can't even steal food as there isn't any, so all are starving to death. Seeing all this, Swallow gets curious as usually when famine hits a village, the people would direct their anger at the lord of the territory. They would rise up, picking torches and pitchforks, and revolt. However, this time, when Haston is facing famine, Swallow is curious why people there haven't protested and are just giving up and dying. Toth says it has been a month since the black disaster hit Haston, and he turns to Swallow, asking if he isn't curious why the village is so quiet and why people haven't risen in revolt. In the core of the ancient, Renee and Adjura are seated around a table, deep in discussion. Adjura mentions she wanted to go to Haston with Swallow, looking really bored. Renee points out that Swallow left the dungeon under their care. With a superior look, she exclaims it's like having Swallow's full trust. Hearing this, Adjura gives a proud look, bellowing she should have figured it. Renee suggests Adjura remain focused at all times, pointing out that humans can invade at any time. Adjura claims she is always keeping an eye out for any intruders using the magic observer's eye. At that moment, Adjura's senses pick up something. She warns Renee someone has invaded, and since her observer's eye didn't react much, she believes it's a single person. Renee stands up and tells Adjura to get ready. Suddenly, a deadly aura fills the air, marking the arrival of someone dangerous. A woman appears, asking why Adjura and Renee are being so jumpy. Meanwhile, Renee is taken aback, seeing who the intruder is. The woman is Elizabeth Battery, who asks Renee how she is. Renee responds there isn't much, and adds that if Elizabeth had informed her of her arrival, she would have prepared something. Elizabeth assures Renee not to be bothered. Smirking, Elizabeth tells Renee if she wants, she can offer her own blood. Elizabeth notices Adjura and inquires who she is. Adjura proudly introduces herself as the Demon King, the ruler of monsters. Elizabeth looks interested in Adjura and points out that her aura is different. Adjura asks Renee if she will be able to see all the dungeon bosses if she lives there permanently. Renee teasingly grabs onto Adjura's face, calling her out for talking about mooching off in the dungeon forever. In a curious tone, Elizabeth asks Renee if Adjura isn't a member of the primordial core yet, which Adjura affirms. Elizabeth inquires where Swallow and Patrick are. Renee explains they have gone out. Elizabeth sighs and gives a concerned look that Swallow and Patrick are absent in such a dire time. Renee asks Elizabeth if something has happened. Elizabeth claims the villages near Chite Castle have been destroyed. Not just that, all the villages are sprayed with blood, but weirdly there's not a single corpse in sight. Elizabeth believes this isn't done by humans, as the blood was flowing in one way, as if someone made a path. At the end of the blood path was Haston. Hearing the corpses disappeared, Adjura thinks it could be the undead. Elizabeth says there aren't many who could do such a thing. It's a well-known fact that most undead do not have intelligence. Among the few that do have intelligence are given the title Elder. If it's that the army of the dead is moving together, it means someone is controlling them. Elizabeth points out that it could be the Lord of the Undead, Immortal King, Erevos behind all this. Both Renee and Adjura give a concerned look. Hearing the name Erevos, Elizabeth says though she doesn't have concrete evidence, it's important to inform Lord Swallow and asks Renee if there are any monsters who can send messages. Renee informs that the dungeon is empty. Elizabeth asks what they should do, as it's important to make Swallow aware. Adjura stands up and shrieks she will step up and do that task. Meanwhile, in Haston, Toth is explaining to Swallow about the Black Disaster. He explains that after the disaster, someone came to Haston and set the fields on fire. The fire spread fast and destroyed all the crops that were ready to be harvested. On top of that, a rumor spread at that time, saying the crops in the area where the Black Disaster passed were contaminated. This way, Haston became a cursed land. When word of even the emperor giving up on Haston spread, the people there fell into despair. Toth claims that even within the despair, there was hope as a rich commoner couple stepped up. Luckily, that couple had many crops not affected by the fire, so they opened their storehouses and distributed the food to residents. Many people even offered to put the couple forward and make them their leaders. As all was starting to get good and people were gaining hope, a tragedy struck when the couple was found murdered in their home. It was believed that some greedy people must have killed the couple, and after that, nobody was able to trust anybody. Since there was no trust among the people, they started fighting, stealing, and starving to death. Toth and some others in the Black Alleys managed to survive due to the rumor of the crops being contaminated. Swallow asks Toth if nothing happened to them after eating the contaminated crops, which Toth affirms. Swallow knows that he didn't even touch any of the crops, so they couldn't have been contaminated, and believes someone must have spread lies. Swallow and Toth then move to the next place. They go to the cemetery where dead bodies have been stacked up like a small hill. Toth says leaving the corpses on the streets would attract bugs, so they piled them up in the cemetery. Swallow asks why the bodies aren't buried, and Toth explains that many relatives of the dead are unable to let go. Toth reveals that the couple who were killed had a daughter. He says that daughter is Rosalina, whose parents' bodies are still among the pile of other corpses. Swallow acknowledges this information. He asks Toth if those soldiers always stand guard there, and Toth agrees and explains the guard work in 2 shifts. Seeing the soldiers controlling the gates in such a situation, Swallow believes they must be following the Lord's orders. He begins to find the new Lord a bit suspicious. Meanwhile, Patrick is back at the Lord's house with the intention to meet him and find out more information. He has a plan to draw the harpies away using the harpy egg he stole so he can meet the Lord. He exclaims that it's a perfect plan and considers himself a genius. However, he soon realizes the plan was perfect but curses seeing so many harpies come after the egg, more than he expected. It's dark all around, and a woman holding a candle sees her brother has been hanged. The brother tells the sister she must live at all costs. Suddenly, the lady wakes up with a start, screaming. She huffs and pants, sweating. A butler arrives, asking the lady if she had another nightmare. The lady, who is the current Harston's lord, Lara Sinavire Earthark, claims she is fine. Lara then gets off the bed to go and get some fresh air. It's been just a few weeks since she became the new lord, but she still vividly remembers the day her brother died. Her family has fled with hordes of wealth, and Harston is still yet to recover. Lara knows there's only one way for her to live, and that is by bringing Harston back to life. Lara reminds a man he promised them salvation. She points out that the man assured he would protect her and her territory. The man, under a hood, says that's right. Lara tells the man to look outside and claims it's not the salvation he promised. The man points out he hasn't gone against his promise and assures Lara all the problems plaguing Harston's residents will be resolved. Lara reveals that the man never tells her anything specific, but she has no choice but to believe in him. The man says his plan is proceeding smoothly and tells Lara to continue leading her life in comfort. He gives a creepy smile and promises all of Lara's problems will soon disappear. Lara says she understands and will trust the man and wait longer. At that moment, the butler arrives, informing Lara she wants to report something. Lara asks what happened, and the butler explains that a knight single-handedly stopped an attack by a flock of harpies at the north gate. Lara is surprised to hear this and asks who the knight is. She then says she will meet the knight herself. The man tells Lara to think it over carefully and warns what if that knight is an assassin in disguise. Lara claims the knight saved Harston, insists on personally praising him, and orders him to be summoned. A while later, Patrick is in the presence of Lord Lara and greets her. Patrick says the road to Harston was difficult and exhausting, but seeing the Lord makes him feel rewarded. Lara praises Patrick's courage and strength and offers him gratitude on behalf of Harston. Meanwhile, Patrick is analyzing Lara and thinks that based on her age, she must have been the previous Lord's younger sister. Lara asks Patrick what family's knight he is, but Patrick remains silent. Lara again asks Patrick for his name, and he responds that he can't reveal it and asks for her understanding. Lara notes that Patrick seems to be hiding many things and asks him if he would refuse to remove his helmet if asked. Patrick claims his face is full of traces of battle and has half his skin on the face cut off. Lara says she won't push Patrick and talks about wanting to repay him and asks if he wants anything. Patrick requests food as compensation because he knows food is precious in Harston, so he hopes to know more about it. Lara agrees to Patrick's request and orders the butler to go and prepare the food. Patrick notices that Lara answered without hesitation, so he assumes there must be no shortage of food in the castle. If that's the case, he wonders why Lara allowed the village to starve. Moreover, Patrick feels a strange sense of kinship from the man under the hood. He asks Lara if he can put forth a question. He claims there has been something bothering him, and turning to the man under the hood, asks him who he is. Moments later, Patrick has explained everything that happened at the Lord's castle to Swallow. Swallow asks if the Lord let him off after inquiring about his identity, and Patrick says he claimed curiosity, so the Lord did nothing. Swallow mentions Patrick felt a kinship with the man and asks why he didn't inquire further, but Patrick says feeling kinship doesn't imply they are undead. He explains some humans practicing black magic can emit energy similar to the undead, and Swallow remarks he would have confronted the man if it was him. Patrick reminds Swallow they are there to solve the problems, not cause more trouble. He asks Swallow if he discovered anything, and Swallow reports that the villagers were scared to eat the grains, leading to starvation. Swallow also mentions that he tried to be close to that thief Rosalina, but she kept running away. Patrick thinks they should have learned mind control magic from Asura, and he shows Swallow the sack of food he received. With the food he has, Patrick suggests they win Rosalina's favor. Rosalina looks absolutely terrified when Swallow tries to talk to her. Seeing Rosalina so taken aback, Swallow tells her to rest assured and offers her some food. Rosalina is startled at first but happily takes the food, pointing out that it's the same food the bishop gives out. Swallow lies that the bishop gave him the food too. With this, Rosalina begins to trust Swallow and asks if he also believes in Bishop, expressing excitement to find another believer. She says that all others are idiots for not believing in the bishop. She asks Swallow if he thinks that too, and Swallow, who has no idea what Rosalina is talking about, nods. A while later, Rosalina claims they have arrived. In front of them is a massive opening of a cave, and seeing it, Swallow gets an eerie feeling. Rosalina leads the way and warns Swallow to be careful of where he steps. Inside the cave, someone claims that the calamity befallen on Harston was a punishment to humans for their evil deeds by an omnipotent being. That person also says that those who have faith in that being are honorable, chosen people. Other people in the cave all praise that man for his words, while Rosalina instructs Swallow to have a seat. The cave appears to be a cult meeting place, and Bishop instructs the followers to always remember the trust placed in them by the omnipotent being. He then says he will break the daily bread the being gave them. Swallow quickly realizes that it's all brainwashing. Suddenly, all the people stand up. Rosalina excitedly says that it's time for communion. The bishop hands out the food, which Swallow recognizes as the same as what Patrick received from the Lord earlier. Rosalina tells Swallow that when the bishop saves Harston, he will let those with strong faith live in eternal happiness. She claims that followers who become close to the bishop can receive more virtuous sacraments, prompting Swallow to ask for clarification. Rosalina points out that they don't know the details but believes they will receive meat instead of snacks. At that moment, the bishop notices Rosalina and exclaims that she came today as well. He hands over the food to Rosalina, who thanks him. He then moves towards Swallow and, seeing he is new, says he hopes Swallow will continue coming in the future. Swallow extends his hand to take the food given by the bishop but senses evil mana. With an angry look, he asks the bishop what he is trying to do. Saying this, he smacks the food away. Swallow pushes the bishop backward, pointing out that he can see the mana that humans might not be able to see. He warns the bishop not to try anything weird with him, causing the bishop to sweat in concern. Rosalina notices Swallow and the bishop's weird interaction and asks Swallow what's happening. Swallow says it's nothing and he was just thanking the bishop for the food. So both of them leave the cave, and Swallow bids Rosalina goodbye. From the encounter with the bishop, Swallow has realized something. In Harston, a false bishop has been brainwashing people using an unknown mana, and he even exudes the energy of undead besides the Lord. Even someone like Swallow would be hard-pressed not to notice something this organized, and Swallow believes there's definitely someone behind all this. Asura is visibly impressed as Swallow details everything he discovered in Harston. Swallow gives a troubled look, noting that more nuisances have appeared for him to deal with. Asura looks down at the damage caused by Swallow to Harston while Swallow asks her the reason for her visiting him. Asura informs Swallow that Elizabeth visited the core of the Ancient and warned about the attack of undead in Harston. She explains what Elizabeth had told her about an incident in Chait Castle and the blood tracks leading to Harston. Asura also mentions that Elizabeth suspects the person behind the undead attack is probably Erebos. Swallow says that might be possible but notes that it's all guesswork at this point. Asura asks when the undead go after a village, Won't it be normal to attack with a number advantage? And she mentions that Harston isn't strong at the moment, so she wonders why they are purposely not using that strategy. She shows suspicions that the enemies might be using the flow of mana and uses her mana detection spell. Using the spell, she notices there are tracks of mana all around and realizes her prediction was right. The bishop walks towards the mountain of corpses, surrounded by the eerie cawing of crows under a blood-red evening sky. He stops and, bending down, puts his hands on the ground. In a flash, he reveals his true scary form. He is Malevolent Dungeon's gatekeeper, Lich Simon Magus. Magus gazes up at the sky, surrounded by a swarm of crows against a dark, ominous backdrop. Amongst the crows, a dark face with glowing eyes appears. Noting that Magus has arrived, Magus bows down, hailing and addressing the face as Lord Erebos. Magus says he is there to report to Lord Erebos, and Erebos claims he won't forget Magus's hardship. Erebos gives Magus permission to speak. Magus informs Erebos of an unexpected intruder, and Erebos, having received the same report from Ummel, asks if the intruder was wearing armor. But Magus denies that the intruder he encountered wore any armor, noting only a connection to deep darkness. Erebos considers this information. Magus questions if Erebos has any guess who the intruder could be, but Erebos has no idea. Lord Erebos points out that it's vital for them to occupy Harston to take over the Empire and warns Magus to always be cautious. Magus claims he is deeply ashamed of his inability to carry out the tasks entrusted to him. Lord Erebos mentions that Ummel requested reinforcement at the Lord's castle and asks Magus if he needs reinforcement as well. Magus responds he doesn't need any at the moment and will notify Erebos if he does. Erebos says that's fine and disappears. Magus is confident that soon the dead will rule over the earth and believes no one will be able to stop them as he polymorphs back into a human. Meanwhile, back at Harston, Azura has detected mana all around and Swallow asks her if she can find who cast that magic. Azura says she can't be sure but points out that for such a large-scale magic like this, a method that maintains continuous mana flow is needed. Swallow assumes the caster must be nearby for this, and Azura says they can also use a medium to steadily direct their mana. Swallow notes that a medium for magic on the scale to encompass all of Harston would demand a vast amount of mana. Azura speculates that the caster must have hidden the medium underground and gestures ahead. She points towards the Lord's castle, deeming it highly suspicious. Also, she notes out that it's all just speculation, while Swallow yawns in tiredness. Swallow informs Azura that Patrick is at the Lord's castle and asks if she's free, to which she says yes. Swallow then tells her to go to the castle with him, hearing which Azura gives a startled look. Swallow grins and says it's time to replace one of the malevolent dungeons. In the Lord's castle, Patrick is looking down at the underground dungeon as he finds it suspicious. He has been smelling rotten corpses from the dungeon for some time, so he is investigating it. As Patrick moves forward, now he can even hear a strange noise. Once he is further inside, he comes across a huge monster chopping flesh with a massive cleaver. Patrick claims he hasn't seen a cleaver in a long time. He apologizes to the monster for interrupting and asks who its master is. Alarmed, the monster turns around and swings the cleaver at Patrick. Patrick reacts quickly and effortlessly grabs the cleaver, pointing out that such an attack would never land on him. The monster uses both hands and applies full force to take back the cleaver but isn't able to. Patrick declares it's not right for the monster to be in the castle dungeon and shatters the cleaver with a single touch, questioning if the castle's lord and the hooded man are allied. He asserts that he no longer needs to act in secrecy now that he's confirmed, gripping the monster's jaw firmly in his hand. Telling it to get lost, Patrick slices the monster in two. He exclaims that it's dirty when suddenly something surprise attacks him from behind. The blow sends Patrick's helmet flying away as he turns around surprised. He sees a strange creature with no body but armor, whom he identifies as a Dullahan. Patrick calls out to the Dullahan. He asks on whose orders the Dullahan is guarding the place, but the Dullahan doesn't answer. Suddenly, the Dullahan swipes his sword at Patrick, which Patrick blocks with his arm's armor. Patrick notices the Dullahan is holding the evil sword which can corrode the opponent's weapon. Patrick also notes that the Dullahan is strong, unlike a typical Dullahan. As the Dullahan launches another attack, Patrick asks him they can talk it out, but the Dullahan doesn't want peace. Patrick dodges his attack and thinks he needs to find out why the Dullahan is there. He believes the lord of the palace must have the answers. Patrick then places his hands on the ground and uses low-class magic, the glide panel, turning the ground slippery, causing the Dullahan to lose balance. Patrick grabs the half-remaining sword as the Dullahan prepares to attack again. In a flash, Patrick lunges towards the Dullahan and strikes him. Patrick acknowledges that since the Dullahan doesn't want to talk, he decides to end the fight quickly. He is holding the extra sword he took from the Dullahan. As a bright flash of light illuminates the dungeon, Patrick easily slices the Dullahan in half. Meanwhile, inside the castle, Lord Lyricinevire wakes up in her bed, feeling cold. A voice asks her if she slept well, and looking up, she sees Patrick standing there. Lyricinevire shouts, demanding to know how Patrick dares to trespass in the middle of the night, to which he calmly states he has business with her. He holds the sword pointed at Lara and gives her 5 minutes to summon the hooded man who was with her earlier. After a while, once the man is summoned, Patrick apologizes for disturbing them and says he picked up something on his night walk. Saying this, he throws the helmet down on the floor. Startled, Lyricinevire asks what the thing is, and Patrick explains it's the helm of a Dullahan. He asks Lyricinevire why she is working with an undead. The man under the hood responds and asks Patrick what he is talking about. Patrick questions Lyricinevire if she really doesn't know what is going on in her land or if she is acting to not know. The man suggests Lyricinevire not to listen to Patrick's nonsense and kick him out, while Patrick claims he killed the Dullahan in the basement. Lyricinevire is shocked to hear this. Patrick informs Lyricinevire of the piles of corpses in the basement, then points his sword at the man, revealing him to be undead as well. However, Lyricinevire refuses to believe Patrick's claims. She points out that the man promised her the salvation of Harston. She gets enraged at Patrick for falsely accusing that man of being an undead. Patrick asks Lyricinevire if she knows who is threatening the safety of Harston. The man in the hood tells both of them to calm down and claims that Dullahans aren't that easy to come across. Patrick agrees and says he was also surprised seeing the Dullahan in the dungeon. That Dullahan was really weird as it didn't even respond to Patrick, despite Dullahans having intelligence. Not just that, but the way it moved during the battle with Patrick wasn't normal, so Patrick investigated after burning up its soul. Patrick points out that he found a mind control magic circle engraved in the Dullahan's armor alongside the name of the owner. The name of the Dullahan is Masham, which is the name of the vice-captain of the raid force that was gathered to raid a brutal undead 30 years ago. It was said that he was really strong, but he disappeared after the raid. Patrick asks Lyricinevire if she knows who the brutal undead that Masham had tried to raid was, but she doesn't seem to know. Patrick says he will ask differently and points his sword at the man, telling him to answer honestly. He puts the sword near the man's throat and asks him where the brutal undead Arivos the miser undead underling is. Lyricinevire is shocked hearing the name Arivos. With a puzzled look, she asks Patrick why he is speaking the name of a boss of an evil dungeon. Suddenly, the room fills with the booming laugh of the man. He continues laughing, seeing which Lyricinevire is taken aback. Lyricinevire bellows at the man, reminding him of his promise to save Harston. The man grins evilly and admits his promise, startling Lyricinevire. He points out that the plan can be changed and admits that a peaceful resolution is out of the question. The man begins to raise his hand, but Patrick cleanly cuts it off with his blade. Patrick then warns the man and Lyricinevire to stay still. The man stares at his cut-off arm through which no blood flows, and Lyricinevire realizes he is an undead. The man says he is Uhumel. He then says he will kill Lyricinevire and everyone else around, turning it into a land of the dead. Lyricenevire's face is full of terror as Uhumel claims it's all part of the plan of the Lord of the Undead, immortal King Arivos. Patrick expresses surprise and asks if undead typically rely on numbers in combat. He points out that he never expected such an organized and well-thought-out plan. Uhumel admits he did take an interest in Patrick and congratulates him for suppressing his expectations by killing Masham. Patrick says it's his first time being praised by someone for killing their underling. Uhumel growls that he is curious about Patrick and asks him why he isn't serving Lord Arivos, being an undead. Hearing Patrick is an undead, Lyricinevire is even more shocked. Patrick realizes his cover is blown and expresses he doesn't want to kill Lyricinevire. With all this, Patrick begins to feel his mood turning sour, and without a second thought, he cuts off another of Uhumel's arms. Patrick then points his sword at Uhumel's throat and tells him to do as asked. But Uhumel says threats don't work on him, and Patrick reminds him he has a lot to lose. Patrick warns Uhumel about Swallow, telling him Swallow is really stronger. He claims that if Swallow wants, he can ruin Uhumel's plan easily. With that, Patrick suggests Uhumel not waste time and explain everything. He also instructs Uhumel to tell him about what his boss Arivos is up to. Uhumel snarls and agrees to give Patrick an answer, asking if he knows how an elder comes to be. Annoyed, Patrick warns Uhumel to stop asking and just answer. Uhumel explains that for a normal human or an elf to be an elder, a super rare supernatural phenomenon or a large amount of surpassing hatred is required. The reason why they are called elders is that each each of them has the power to fight 1,000 zombies by themselves, and Lord Arivos can easily make such elders. Hearing this, Patrick realizes it must be the reason for isolating Harston and creating a religion. Uhumal reveals their main plan is to make an elder by doing all this. He adds that Harston is a perfect place for all undead to gather, and the reason for starving people is to weaken their resolve. Patrick points out that he understands and asks why there is a mountain of corpses, to which Uhumal says it's to create even more elders. Uhumal reveals their plan to destroy the Empire. Patrick believes that if the Empire is destroyed and all humans are turned to undead, Lord Arivos would then target the 7 great evil dungeons. Suddenly, Uhumal begins to mutter spells and summons dark, strange circular symbols around him. Laracinavir is frozen with fear. Uhumal says he can cast spells even without hands, as many shadowy arms start enclosing around Patrick. Uhumal claims he would never reveal the truth and says there exists no being that can go against Lord Arivos. He also points out that the only one who can go against Lord Arivos is the ancient monster who has been in slumber for many years. Saying this, Uhumal prepares to attack Patrick, creating a glowing circular energy ball. Patrick, hearing Uhumal's talk, says he wants to ask a question as he forces the shadowy hands off his body. Seeing Patrick break through his bindings, Uhumal is bewildered. Patrick says he understands all Uhumal has said and takes his helm off and drops it. His eyes glowing bright blue, he asks if the ancient monster actually appears, would Arivos' plans be all ruined? Uhumal bellows out, deeming Patrick's threats nonsense. Suddenly, something pierces Uhumal from behind, taking him by surprise. A huge explosion inside the castle sends smoke and dust bellowing into the sky. Patrick stares ahead and sees Lord Swallow has arrived and claims it was such perfect timing. As dust fills the room, Laracinavir covers her mouth, startled by a sudden shriek from someone who hit their head. Adra, who seems to have fallen down, complains that the building is too brittle. Patrick looks down at Adra and compliments her timing. Swallow asks Patrick what he has discovered, to which Patrick replies that he has found out everything. Swallow notices Laracinavir, who looks terrified. He then raises his head and looks up, only to see an attack of massive dark mana flying towards him. The attack hits Swallow and causes a small explosion where he was sitting. Swallow's anger rises, and his body turns dark and intimidating. He sends dark spikes towards Uhumal, piercing his body in multiple places. Uhumal recognizes the aura of the power and is bewildered. Patrick reminds Uhumal that he did mention his companion was much stronger. Uhumal is still shocked as he realizes the ancient monster is free and walking. Lost for words, Uhumal realizes he couldn't even feel the energy of the crystal upstairs. He looks over at Adra and senses her energy, recognizing that she is a demon king. Uhumal decides he should stall longer and inform all this to Lord Arivos, so he asks Swallow why he has come there, coughing and claiming he is sure Swallow had gone into hiding. But before he can continue, a blinding flash of light fills the room, causing a large explosion that blows off the remaining top of the castle. As the dust clears, Uhumal is laying face down, coughing. He tells Swallow and the others that they are already too late. Annoyed, Adra sends a bolt of lightning at Uhumal, reprimanding him for talking too much. Swallow gives a huge yawn and points out that Uhumal is still not dead. Uhumal, now his whole body emitting a massive amount of mana, says his lord has descended upon the land, demanding worship. Patrick tries to interject, but Swallow claims he can see it as well. Patrick sighs and remarks that someone is certainly making a grand entrance. Meanwhile, elsewhere, people notice that the sky is looking peculiar, and with curiosity, they all stare up. The sky is dark, full of strange clouds. Rosalina seems in a hurry as she sprints, huffing and panting. Suddenly, a voice calls her name, causing her to stop. She sees Toth standing there, asking her where she has been. Rosalina replies that she went for a walk to clear her head at Jarbet Plaza. She quickly clasps her mouth, realizing she mentioned the name of the place where no one is allowed to go. Worried that Toth will scold her, she apologizes, but Toth instead laughs. Rosalina is surprised to see that Toth isn't mad at her. Toth informs Rosalina that their captain and others have decided to leave Harston the next day. He says the captain doesn't trust those two knights and tells Rosalina to follow him as he explains on the way. Rosalina and Toth head to the mountain of corpses where Rosalina's parents are buried. Toth reminds Rosalina that they won't be able to come back to this place for long once they leave Harston. He offers Rosalina a choice to do as she wishes. Rosalina says she doesn't understand why the captain wants to leave, as she is confident Harston will be saved. Toth points out that, despite Rosalina being in the religion, waiting for salvation is pointless when it will never come. He explains that it's not only gods who can grant salvation, but our choices can bring salvation. Rosalina mutters if her actions can really bring salvation. Turning towards Toth, she acknowledges that he is right. Toth hands over the flame to Rosalina and asks if she can do it, to which she affirms. Holding the flames, Rosalina extends her hand to burn the corpses. However, someone's hand grabs Rosalina's arm, stopping her from torching the corpses. Taken aback, Toth asks who the stranger is. Rosalina turns sideways and sees that it's the bishop. Rosalina is shocked to see the bishop there, though she doesn't know he is Magus, an undead. Magus tightens his grip on Rosalina's arm, making her ask what he is doing. The flame Rosalina is holding begins to burn Magus's arm, while Thoth tells him to let go of Rosalina. Thoth smells burning flesh as Magus's arm ignites, and Rosalina tells him to put out the fire. Suddenly, Thoth pulls Rosalina back, freeing her from Magus's grasp. Thoth falls backward, groaning while still holding onto Rosalina. Looking bewildered, Thoth stares at Magus, whose whole body is now engulfed in flames. Finally, Magus reveals his true, terrifying form. Thoth finally realizes the bishop is an undead, while Rosalina remains puzzled. Magus snaps at them to remain silent, claiming someone is about to descend. Both Thoth and Rosalina are speechless in fear as the corpses suddenly begin to move. Snarling and groaning, all the corpses come to life, horrifying Rosalina. Magus seems to have reanimated the dead and turned them into undead with his mana. Unable to believe what he's seeing, Thoth shouts at Rosalina to get up and run. So, filled with adrenaline, Rosalina and Thoth sprint away as the undead chase them. After running for long, they enter a house, huffing and puffing, as Thoth barricades the door with chairs and a sofa. Exhausted, Rosalina slumps on the floor, claiming she can't move anymore. Thoth reminds her they have no choice and suggests they move to the second floor, as the first floor is still unsafe. Since Rosalina can't move, Thoth tells her to get on his back. Carrying Rosalina, Thoth walks up the stairs, sweating from exhaustion. Meanwhile, outside, the undead have surrounded the house. Thoth is concerned, unsure if both he and Rosalina will survive. Rosalina asks Thoth if the place smells horrible because of that, pointing at it. Thoth sees what Rosalina is pointing to, a corpse lying dead inside a room. He then puts Rosalina down as she asks if they are safe, which he denies. He warns Rosalina they are still in danger and tells her to stay focused if she wants to live. Thoth notices the corpse is holding a weapon in its hand. Removing his coat, Thoth's expression turns serious as he picks up the weapon, causing Rosalina to be terrified. Thoth's expression remains intense as he swipes the weapon at Rosalina, who shrieks and closes her eyes. As Rosalina opens her eyes, she sees Thoth kneeling in front of her, having cut the bishop's symbol from her neck. Thoth tells Rosalina to believe in something believable from now on. At that moment, a loud noise fills the house, startling them both. Thoth realizes the undead must have pushed the door open and forced their way inside. Standing up, Thoth turns away from Rosalina. Confused, Rosalina calls out to Thoth asking where he's going. Thoth exits the room and, turning to Rosalina, gives a warm smile. Concerned, Rosalina tells Thoth to wait, stands and tries to run towards him. However, Thoth slams the door shut and locks it from the outside with a blood-dabbed cloth, hoping the undead won't smell Rosalina inside. Meanwhile, Rosalina screams and begs Thoth not to leave her alone as the undead begin climbing the stairs. Thoth warns Rosalina to not make a noise, no matter what she hears. He also tells her no to move without thinking as Rosalina puts a hand over her mouth. Thoth praises Rosalina for listening to him. The undead finally reach the second floor, growling and snarling as they go after Thoth. Thoth grips the weapon tightly and prepares to confront the undead, apologizing to Rosalina for always picking on her. Inside, Rosalina is in tears but doesn't dare cry out loud. The sky is red at dusk, with glowing streetlights illuminating the buildings. The undead are growling, and Thoth's weapon has been snapped in half, with blood scattered around. The glass windows of the houses are shattered as Magus hovers above his armies of undead. He snarls at the undead, gathering their attention, and with his hand raised, he commands them to attack. Noticing the eerie red sky, the remaining villagers of Harston are heading towards the Lord's castle, suspecting she might be responsible for it. As they see the castle in flames, they are convinced that the heavens must be angry. At that moment, a loud scream causes the villagers to turn around in alarm. They notice someone standing nearby, all wondering who it might be. Thoth, covered in blood, shrieks that it's dangerous. A man steps forward, offering to take a look at Toth's wounds. He mentions he was a trainee at the Magic Tower's Wind Guild. Toth mutters undead while the magician discovers Toth hasn't got any wounds despite the blood covering him. He wonders whose blood it might be as the undead close in on them. One of the villagers turns around and comments that more people seem to be heading towards them. Toth suddenly grabs the magician's hand and bellows that the undead are coming. The villagers are alarmed as they notice an undead standing right nearby. The undead snarls, baring its teeth, and lunges at a person nearby. Out of nowhere, a knight comes galloping on a horse and severs the undead's head clean off. The knight informs the villagers that the undead aren't that strong. He gives them the choice to either run or fight together. All the villagers agree to fight. The knight notices the magicians, who explain that they were on assignment during the Black Disaster and managed to survive. One man raises his hand, saying he will fight, and following him, all the villagers do the same. The knight responds that it's good. He then rallies the villagers to defend and fight against the undead, urging those who can wield weapons to the front lines and others to set up a perimeter defense. Moments later, the undead close in, growling and snapping their teeth. The knight instructs the magicians to ready their magic, and they fire massive bolts of lightning straight at the undead. Meanwhile, the captain feels the massive explosion nearby and wonders what must be going on. He seems worried, wondering where Toth and Rosalina might be. To his surprise, he sees Rosalina slumped against a wall nearby, seemingly passed out. Calling out her name, the captain approaches her, and Rosalina opens her eyes as he asks what happened to her. Rosalina explains that Toth told her to stay put, and she came all the way out here because she was frightened. She begins to sob, and the captain realizes the truth, asking Rosalina if Toth resented her when he died. However, he himself states Toth would never do that and reminds Rosalina that she is alive because of Toth. Rosalina says those undead weren't normal. Confused, the captain asks what she means. Rosalina asserts they need the help of Sir Knight, referring to Patrick. The captain notes that Patrick is probably in the Lord's castle. He then pulls out a potion of strength and gives it to Rosalina. Getting up, he points out that he is the captain and can't just leave his comrades to fight alone. He then walks away, telling Rosalina to go and bring those Patrick and Swallow. Meanwhile, in the castle, Patrick looks out of the window, noting the chaos outside, and Asura comments on the people's struggles. Swallow, lying down, claims it's nothing to do with them, but Patrick retorts that it's everything to do with them. Patrick notes that the humans seem to have the advantage at the moment as Swallow asks how long the humans will last. Patrick believes they won't last long, as soon they will tire out and get overrun by the thousands of undead. Additionally, Patrick mentions that among the undead, there might be an elder mixed in. Patrick suggests that Arivos seems to have put a lot of effort into his plan and thinks they should also start repaying the favor. Swallow smirks and agrees to repay the favor but insists they need to do something before that. Patrick asks Swallow what he is planning to do as Swallow gets on his feet. Laracinavire, looking terrified, is approached by Swallow, who asks her name. Still scared, Laracinavire stammers her name. Swallow kneels nearby her and introduces himself. He then gently lifts Laracinavare's chin and asks her if she wants to live. Swallow lifts Laracinavare's chin and introducing himself, asks if she wants to live. Patrick reminds Swallow they need to kill Laracinavire, not save her. Swallow says he has changed his mind, but Patrick insists Harston is already past the point of no return. Swallow asks if they are really giving up on Harston because of the undead, which Patrick confirms. Swallow suggests that if all the undead disappeared from Harston and they made Laracinavire follow their commands, it would be worth it. Patrick considers the suggestion, thinking it might not be a bad idea. Asura points out that the humans who have learned the truth will not stay quiet, but Swallow believes not all are like that. He believes Laracinavire has a reason to live as she looks brave, not fearing Swallow even after seeing his true form. Swallow thinks Laracinavire has something special about her. All the heroes Swallow encountered earlier had something special about them, and he believes Laracinavire has extraordinary mental capacity to stay sane even after seeing him. Laracinavire agrees that she has a reason to live. Swallow points out that a human like Laracinavire wouldn't go out of their way to die, as Patrick asks if that's the only thing he's going off of. Swallow adds that he also has his gut feelings. Patrick points out that he can't say much since Swallow is adamant about it. Patrick reminds Swallow that he has to take care of the aftermath if things go wrong. Swallow tells Laracinavire that everything will be done if she says, "Please save us," prompting her to inquire about the aftermath. Swallow explains that the undead will be chased away from Harston with Patrick's help. Patrick bellows at Swallow, asking if he is trying to sell him off. Laracinevire bows to Swallow and asks what she needs to do in return. Swallow tells her she must give up everything she has to him. Seeing Laracinevire puzzled, Swallow makes it clear that she will have to offer everything to his team. Laracinevire becomes speechless, knowing that if she declines, she will definitely die. If she accepts, she will live but lose everything. She wonders if her brother hadn't died, would all this have happened? Would she ever be in this position? As she remains silent, Patrick suggests they just put Laracinevire to death. At that moment, someone with bloody feet comes rushing into the castle, which Patrick senses and informs the others. Adra asks if she should block the door with magic, but Swallow tells her to just open it. Adra does as asked, and as she opens the door, Rosalina comes running in. Rosalina seems happy to see Swallow and requests his help. She stops near Swallow, panting, and informs him the village is overrun by the undead and begs for his help. She also explains that Toth has died and the captain and others are waiting for help, trying to hold on. Once again, she requests Swallow's help. Her eyes travel to Patrick, and she realizes he is actually a skeleton, shrieking in shock while Swallow points to Laracinevire, saying she is in charge. Rosalina turns towards Laracinevire as Laracinevire asks if the people of Harston are dying. Patrick notes that the humans must have reached their limits and asks Adra for a favor. Adra produces a circular rune and summons a huge eye with wings, ordering it to go off track and go directly. The eye monster flies above Harston, acting like a broadcast camera, and Adra produces a screen to see everything the eye monster is seeing. All of them see that the undead have overrun and are killing every human in sight. Seeing this, both Laracinevire and Rosalina are distressed. There are even ghouls among the undead, and Patrick assumes the humans won't live for much longer. Rosalina is on the verge of tears as she remembers her people who are now being torn apart by the undead, all screaming in pain. Her face saddens, and tears leak out seeing all this. She calls out Swallow and Patrick for just staying idle and not doing anything, begging them to save her and her people. Filled with rage, Rosalina turns to Laracinevire and asks what she was doing while people were dying one by one. Rosalina screams, demanding answers from Laracinevire. Sounding desperate, Laracinevire turns to Swallow and requests him to save them. She also begins to cry as she earnestly begs Swallow to save the remaining ones in Harston. Swallow finally decides to help as he, Patrick, and Adra begin to walk out. Swallow claims it's not too difficult of a task, and the three of them make their way to confront the undead. The battle with the undead is ongoing as an old man gets slammed down to the ground. He is badly hurt and realizes the undead aren't weak. He is still unable to believe that humans fell so easily against the undead. As one undead lunges at the man, he thinks it's the end of him. However, Adra intervenes in time, kicking the undead into the ground, calling it nasty. Adra's boots get drenched in blood as she wishes she had landed on the roof. The other undead growl and sprint towards Adra, who finds them too loud. She uses her mana and fires spells at the undead, causing them to be engulfed in flames. She looks proud after finishing all of the undead in just a single go. The old man, in awe, calls Adra an angel. This pisses off Adra, and in rage, she kicks the man in his guts. Adra tells the man to get lost if he values his life as he gets sent flying backward. The man then gets up and sprints away while Adra calls after him, asking how he dared compare her to an angel. Adra shows that she does not like helping humans. At that moment, Magus arrives and learns that Adra isn't human but a demon. Sensing her immense mana, he deduces she is a demon king. He then asks Adra why she is siding with humans. Adra responds that she will do as she pleases. Magus snarls that he will find out the truth after ripping flesh off Adra. Saying this, he suggests Adra throw her humanity and become undead as well. Looking irritated, Adra points out that Magus is really talkative. Magus raises his arm and claims he is serving the commander of the undead, the darkness of the 10 evils. He asserts that he will never lose to someone like Adra as he uses his mana and summons a few minions. Adra points out that she is not sure what Magus is talking about and reminds him she will not be the one to face him. Looking puzzled, Magus turns sideways to see the intimidating and scary eyes of Swallow looking down at him. Swallow says he finally found Magus and reminds him he had told him he would make sure to remember him. Saying this, Swallow pulls back a punch and smacks it onto Magus's face. The punch sends Magus smashing into the wall. Swallow grins, saying that landing the punch wasn't a bad feeling. He looks down at Magus sprawled on the ground and believes he must be the gatekeeper of the undead army as well as the 7 great dungeons. Swallow then tells Magus to get up quickly quickly, assuming he shouldn't be dead so easily. Asura asks Swallow if he has any grudge against Magus. Swallow claims that he just doesn't like Magus and wants to hit him more. He also says it will be no good staying there and asks Asura if she thinks Arivos is in the village. Asura thinks not and points to the sky at a barrier made to trap everyone in the village. She believes the caster must be outside the barrier and says she can't break it. Swallow then instructs Asura to take care of the remaining undead. He points out that it will be good to minimize any more loss of humans, and Asura agrees to do it. Swallow says he will go and have a one-on-one with Arivos. At this very moment, more undead are arriving. As Swallow turns to leave, Asura asks how long he will take, to which he says 15 to 20 minutes. Looking happy, Asura claims she will be able to hold just fine if it's only 20 minutes, and she wishes Swallow a safe trip. Swallow walks towards Magus, who asks if he is really the ancient monster. Swallow says Magus is partially right, causing Magus to ask who he is. Swallow says he is Patrick's slave, which Magus deems nonsense. Suddenly, Magus summons a massive circular rune and says he wasn't foolishly waiting there without preparing anything. He pushes Swallow backward with his attack, saying he is one of the pillars of Lord Arivos' forces who has never disappointed him. Saying this, he summons massive bolts of lightning which strike everywhere around the area. Magus then gets on his feet and, huffing, thinks he should take this chance and get to Lord Arivos. However, he receives a shock as he sees Lord Swallow on his feet, looking furious. Magus curses in worry as he learns that Swallow is really the ancient monster of the malevolent dungeons. He knows that it's very dangerous, so he turns around and sprints away, hoping to reach Lord Arivos. He puts full effort into escaping, not realizing Swallow's massive jaws are closing in on him from behind. Once Magus is inside his mouth, Swallow shuts his jaws, but he realizes Magus has managed to escape. Magus summons a portal and disappears through it, leaving Swallow to realize he attempted to devour Magus in one bite but failed. Swallow knows it will be annoying to spend time finding Magus, but he can't just let him get away. He then remembers he had promised Asura to be back in just 20 minutes. He looks down at where Asura is fighting and expresses concern for her but knows he can't waste any more time there. He raises his hand, preparing an attack, thinking that Magus must have fled to his mother and Arivos is likely outside the village. Meanwhile, Magus appears out of a wall nearby, and sensing something, he turns back. A massive bright laser-like attack comes hurling towards Magus. The powerful attack was launched by Swallow with the intention to blow everything on the way to catch Magus off guard. Swallow's attack causes the whole path straight ahead of him to blow off, causing a massive trench. As Swallow walks along the trench, he feels like he can even hear Patrick's voice. A little ahead, Swallow comes across the dead corpse of Magus. He then grabs onto the corpse and drags it along as he moves forward. When he reaches the end of the village, he sees the barrier. Swallow acknowledges the barrier's toughness as even Asura's strength can't break it. Impressed with the barrier, Swallow extends his arm to examine it. He is startled seeing his arm get severely damaged upon passing it through the barrier. Swallow thinks it's impressive, despite his hand now being destroyed. He believes he can get through the barrier and hopes the bracelet he has will hold out. Moreover, Swallow fears the scolding he will get from Patrick if the bracelet gets destroyed. He gives a grin, planning to blame the corpse of Magus if anything goes wrong. Swallow looks sideways and notes that there aren't humans in that area. With that, he turns back and walks a few paces away from the barrier. He then transforms into his monstrous form with all the tentacles and scary face. After that, he sprints forward straight at the barrier. Suddenly a deafening outburst shakes the whole village. Swallow has successfully managed to tear apart the barrier and left the village. Meanwhile, the undead who are outside the village all get alerted and turn around. Upon arriving, Swallow notices that they have surrounded him and remarks on the overwhelming number of undead present. The undead grumble and grunt, lunging straight for Swallow with their hands extended toward him. Swallow summons a huge amount of mana and incinerates any undead nearby him. At that moment, a group of undead elders advance and encircle Swallow. An elder with many arms summons a sword and pierces it into the ground. With this, countless more undead soldiers arrive at the site from all directions. Swallow stands alone, facing the elders, and admits he should have acted decisively from the beginning. From the darkness, two enormous glowing eyes appear as Swallow extends his arm, presenting the bracelet as a gift. The one with the glowing eyes steps forward as Swallow mentions they have a lot to discuss, referring to Arivos who has just revealed himself. Lord Arivos finally makes an appearance. He asks Swallow if he is saying it's okay for the undead to be suppressed by humans. Swallow doesn't respond. Arivos reminds Swallow that humans are selfish and have always wanted more, invading the lands of other races. Swallow irritably tells Arivos to get to the point. Arivos says he wants humans to disappear and points out that Swallow has the power to easily rid of the Empire. He claims he thought taking down the Empire would be impossible without bringing down Reyes until he heard Reyes was struck by the Black Disaster. Arivos points out that if Swallow had desired to wipe out the humans, every demon would have supported him. Swallow, even more bored, tells Arivos to talk less and get to the main point. Arivos snarls that if Swallow hadn't been so hands-off, so many demons wouldn't have died. He claims that with Swallow's help, they would have wiped out every human. Swallow considers this and asks Arivos if he is blaming him for all this. Arivos affirms and says Swallow is the root cause, which Swallow instantly denies. Swallow asks Arivos if he wants him to get out of his way. Arivos remarks that Swallow is disappointing. Suddenly, a massive circular rune appears right above Swallow. From the rune, a paw of a creature is visible, causing Swallow to be puzzled. A second later, a huge monster resembling a cross between a bull and a wild boar descends. Swallow reacts quickly as he pulls the bracelet off his hand. The monster lands on the ground, causing the ground to crumble. Meanwhile, back in Harston, Asura is busy battling the undead, realizing there are too many. With a bored look, she raises her weapon and sends an attack at the undead. Followed by a bright flash of light, all the undead get burned to a crisp. Asura thinks she should move quickly as the undead are all spread out. She stares at the barrier in the sky, noting it's close to God-class magic, as expected of Swallow. She also recalls Swallow mentioning he would have a quick one-on-one with Arivos, but only 3 minutes have passed since then. At that moment, someone huffing appears behind Asura. It's the captain, who looks injured as he asks if everyone is safe. Asura replies that the other humans are burning in the fire, pointing to it. The captain, who is having difficulty opening his eyes, asks Asura if she is a companion of the knights. Seeing Asura confused, the captain explains that he refers to the knights in giant suits of armor and the one dressed like a beggar. Asura claims that she is not a companion but just a servant of the knights. The captain, meanwhile, hopes that Rosalina has found the knights by now. He is also relieved that Toth didn't die in vain and that Harston will be saved. Deeply wounded, the captain tells Asura that he will soon turn into an undead. Asura responds that she knows, and the captain asks if he can request a favor. He is startled as he sees Asura's true form, realizing she isn't a human, but that doesn't matter to him, and so he requests Asura to hand him any weapon that's lying around. Asura remains silent and analyzes the captain, then brings a spear. She hands the spear to the captain, reminding him that he is a warrior, and he takes it firmly. Sometime later, Asura notices an ominous aura emanating from the nearby forest as she flies above Harston. The massive aura even uproots the trees of the forest with ease. The monster that appeared from the rune charges at Swallow. Swallow finds the monster weird as he sends it flying backward. Lord Arivos claims it's as he expected, noting that such strength is befitting of the tile ancient monster of Swallow. Arivos explains that the thing he summoned is an undead with an ancient slime at its core. Swallow, who is taken aback, turns around sensing something. Arivos seems to have used a god-class magic to summon massive fangs of evil right above Swallow. Arivos claims that it's the strongest god-class magic that not even Swallow can withstand. Saying this, he sends the fangs straight down at Swallow, telling him to be in awe. The thousands of undead watch as the fangs of evil pierce down upon Swallow's body. Swallow is rooted to the spot while Arivos shrieks that he will finally kill the ancient monster. He bellows out that he will fill the land with undead and become a ruler over the dead. He summons more fangs of evil, telling Swallow to feel blessed to die after wandering for thousands of years. The fangs of evil rain down upon Swallow, who suddenly reacts in defense. A massive explosion illuminates the night sky, sending shockwaves far and wide. The remaining fangs of evil all crumble mid-ace as Arivos watches. Swallow shrieks that the fangs of evil hurt and says he won't let Arivos hit him again. Arivos is puzzled, hearing Swallow say he took the attack on purpose. In anger, Arivos blows off a few trees in front of him. Swallow wonders why Arivos is taking his anger out on the trees. He then asks Arivos if the fangs of evil are really the strongest magic he can use and if he has anything stronger. Now Arivos is certain that Swallow let him strike to test the power of the god-class magic. Realizing he doesn't stand a chance, Arivos decides to retreat. Arivos notes that he was too hasty and starts looking for openings to flee. Meanwhile, Swallow moves forward, warning Erevos not to get any weird ideas. Erevos is in a dilemma as Swallow urges him to use any stronger attacks if he has them. Seeing Erevos not respond, Swallow asks why he is silent and confirms that he doesn't have anything stronger. Suddenly, Erevos uses another spell and sends down massive blade-like attacks at Swallow. Swallow sighs as the attacks strike down on him. At that moment, a most powerful streak of light descends upon Swallow, illuminating every undead around. Erevos has cast a powerful spell, binding Swallow's entire body with big and strong chains. Swallow claims he hates these kinds of spells and roars in annoyance. Suddenly, a huge monster, one of those god-class ones, lunges at Swallow while he is chained. Unable to move due to the chains, Swallow is swallowed by the monster. Swallow, now in human form and inside the monster's body, is disgusted with the slimy thing around him. He notes that the monster is too big and decides to get a little serious himself. He transforms again into his monstrous form, bursting out from the monster's body and blowing it apart. The aftermath sends a powerful aura in all directions. Swallow, with his intimidating eyes, stares down at Erevos, who stares back. Swallow returns to his human form, and looking at Erevos, Swallow mentions it's time to replace one of the 7 great evil dungeons. Back in the Lord's castle, Rosalina and Laracinavire look concerned, staring at Patrick, who is sitting with his head in his hands, lost in thought. At that moment, Laracinavire and Rosalina feel a surge of mana coming their way. From the opening, they witnessed a massive explosion, prompting Laracinavire to inquire about what is happening. Patrick explains that it's Swallow making a mess while taking care of the undead army. Looking hopeful, Laracinavire asks if Harston will be saved. Patrick says it's not sure yet and suggests Laracinavire not worry too much. Meanwhile, Asura seems to have killed every one of the remaining undead in the village. She finally returns to the castle and slumps down, saying it was tiring. Laying on her back, she claims it's been a while since she used so much mana. Patrick praises Asura for doing a good job. Asura questions if Swallow is done yet, and Patrick informs her that Swallow is still fighting. Patrick points out that the power released by Swallow is awe-inspiring, and he notes that whenever Swallow intervenes to help, he tends to cause more destruction. Because of this, Patrick claims that he will have a lot of work to do after it's all over. He also wonders why Swallow is dragging out the fight for so long. He then calls out to Rosalina, who turns back. Patrick has his sword out and, as he claims, Laracinavire was only promised to be kept alive, so he wants to finish off Rosalina. Patrick raises his sword at Rosalina, claiming only the Lord of the territory was promised to be kept alive, and decides to kill her. He points out there's no point in keeping anyone unimportant alive. Rosalina falls back in fear while Laracinavire pleads with Patrick to spare Rosalina. Patrick draws himself up to his full height, looking terrifying as he gazes down at the 2 girls. Then, suddenly, Patrick breaks into a smile, claiming he was just joking. He knows Rosalina isn't a threat, having lost everyone close to her, and with her mental state, hurting her serves no purpose. Patrick also worries that killing Rosalina might upset Laracinavire, which would be a loss for him. Patrick calls out to Asura and asks if she can put others to sleep. Asura confirms and asks who she needs to do that to. Patrick says he wants to speak to Laracinavire alone, and Asura understands, casting a spell to make Rosalina fall asleep. Once Rosalina is fast asleep, Patrick suggests they get started now. He reminds Laracinavire that they have completed their part in saving Harston and reminds her of her promise. The first request Patrick makes of Laracinavire is that she can't tell anyone what she has seen so far. He offers to tell Laracinavire a story about a heroic territory lord who took all the insults to protect her land. In the story, the lord realized that the undead were going to overrun her territory and resolved to protect it and its citizens. However, she was in a situation where she didn't have enough soldiers, and the enemies had surrounded her, leaving her no choice but to ask for help. Even before help arrived, people started insulting her because they were dying to undead while waiting for reinforcements. Despite this, the Lord held steadfast until reinforcements from the Empire finally arrived, driving away the undead and saving the territory, which ends the story. Patrick tells Laracinavire that she isn't like the Lord who kept hiding. He claims she is the Lord who sacrificed herself to save her people, prompting Laracinavire to ask if he expects her to lie to her subjects. Patrick points outside the window and reminds Laracinavire that she was the one who said she wants to live. He instructs Laracinavire to distribute all the castle's supplies to the remaining people, promising that help from other cities will arrive soon. Laracinavire questions Patrick about how he can be sure help will arrive, and Patrick assures her that he will ensure assistance comes. He also notes that since it's quiet, Swallow must have finished fighting and suggests they head towards him. Laracinavire, with a question in her mind, asks Patrick why he is going to such lengths to save Harston. She knows that Patrick is a dungeon monster and would never care for other people's lives. Patrick firmly reminds Laracinevire that she herself expressed a desire to live and warns her not to ask any more questions from then on. Meanwhile, Swallow has defeated Arivos and declares it's time to replace one of the 7 great dungeons, expressing sorry for Arivos. Swallow also points out that if Arivos hadn't done what he did, he might have stayed alive. He also expresses annoyance as everyone keeps disturbing him. Arivos admits he is shocked seeing Swallow's strength. Swallow asks Arivos why he decided to invade only Harston, knowing it was his territory. Arivos claims that Harston is the most effective location to invade the Empire from. Hearing this, Swallow realizes that Arivos came to Harston despite knowing it was his territory. Arivos asks Swallow what he thinks the reason might be. Suddenly, Arivos uses a spell and summons a massive circular thing beside him. Swallow reacts quickly and sends sharp stings at Arivos, piercing his body. Despite this, Arivos begins to laugh loudly. The sharp stings piercing Arivos' body begin to glow, and finally, a massive explosion blows Arivos apart. This causes Arivos' head to roll down to Swallow's feet, revealing that Arivos wasn't attempting to use transfer magic. Swallow decides it doesn't matter, as Arivos was going to die anyway, and he reaches down to grab Arivos' head. As he looks around, he is taken aback. He sees the damage done to the place and knows that unless he fixes it, it will be useless. At that moment, he hears someone approaching and, looking back, sees Patrick and Asura running towards him. Swallow begins to sweat in fear as Patrick shouts at him not to move, saying he will come to him and pointing out that he missed him. Swallow freezes and lets go of the head, realizing he is now in trouble. Rain is pouring in Harston, cascading over the buildings and alleyways. The water fills the puddles and street, reflecting Rosalina's happy memories with the late captain. Rosalina is taking refuge from the rain, grappling with her sorrow. She is grief-stricken, having lost everyone close to her. Now she is the only one remaining. She is sheltering beneath a house as rain pours, rattling the roofs and street. She exclaims that she hates it. She hates everyone, feeling distant from all. She seeks someone to blame, her eyes red with rage, thinking about those who killed everyone. Meanwhile, Renee excitedly welcomes Swallow back in the core of the ancient. Swallow, displeased, mutters he's back, with Patrick and Asura behind him. Still excited, Renee says she had been waiting for them all. At that moment, a stalactite falls, and Renee quickly kicks it away, smiling as she says she's cleaned everything. Swallow strokes her hair and praises her, saying she did well. Asura lies down, claiming she is exhausted, while Patrick and Swallow sit down quietly. Renee asks Swallow if he's really tired. She asks if he wants dinner first or a bath. Patrick notices Renee's changed behavior and asks Elizabeth what she's been teaching her. Elizabeth nervously asks if everything is well, as Swallow tells her she can leave. Patrick explains that around 3,000 humans died, and that Swallow even blew up the whole town. Apart from that, everything went well. Elizabeth asks Swallow what he did there, to which Swallow claims he only cleaned up the undead. Elizabeth questions if he really only cleaned up the undead, and Swallow affirms he cleaned them perfectly. Saying this, Swallow pulls out the head of Arivos and puts it on the table. Elizabeth picks up the head, and she is speechless. While Swallow drinks water, Elizabeth tells him to wait and reveals the head is just a shell. Both Patrick and Renee are shocked to hear this. The night has fallen, and Swallow agrees Arivos did use magic at the end, while Patrick points out that Swallow did a bad job cleaning up. Patrick says that letting Laracinevire live was already questionable, and now even Arivos being alive complicates things further. Swallow points out that Battery said Arivos would have lost at least 70% of his life. Patrick reminds Swallow that the conflict between the Great Evil Dungeons has started and claims they need to be more careful now. Patrick is sure that Arivos won't make a move for a while. He says he will take care of the aftermath in Harston, but points out that accepting monsters into the dungeon depends on Swallow. He then asks Swallow if he is listening, but finds Swallow has fallen asleep and is snoring. Patrick curses in rage. Meanwhile, back in Harston, countless bodies are hung from branches of a massive tree. Rosalina is at the bottom, looking up. Nearby, a group of people are discussing, as one mentions his wife and kids are all dead. That man claims he would rather go to the afterlife than live like this. He turns to Rosalina and tells her she should eat if she is deciding to leave. Rosalina points out that she has nowhere to go and asks why they are suffering when they did nothing wrong. She tells the people to think properly, clenches her teeth, and says it's all unfair. She tells them not to misdirect their hate and reminds them of the futility of meaningless death. She explains that if they're going to die anyway, they should seek revenge and die with pride. The people, filled with motivation from Rosalina's words, ask her what they should do. Rosalina says that they have to kill all the undead. A hero has been summoned in the presence of the king. The king addresses the hero, who kneeling, responds courteously. The king points out that he called Livestein because he didn't zone out during his speech. The king reminds Livestein of the raid force's lives on his shoulders and sets high expectations, to which Livestein vows to make him proud. A dark outline of something is visible flying above the clouds in the clear blue sky. The flying object is a carriage, held aloft by two flying creatures. Inside the carriage, Livestein sits across from a lady who confirms if he truly received full rights to lead the dungeon raid. Livestein points out the warrant for Paymore might be useless, but the lady says it's enough for Paymore to know his arrest warrant is out. Livestein becomes silent as the lady watches out the window. It's been a month since the black disaster descended upon Riez. It caused a lot of unrest in the upper echelons of the empire, with blames being thrown around, and since then, many things have changed. The creatures come to a stop and land the carriage in front of a huge building. The lady reminds Livestein of a meeting in 2 hours and asks what if he's late, to which Livestein tells her to wait until he arrives. Livestein asks about someone, and the lady says that someone should be inside. Livestein walks to the door and, announcing his arrival, flings the doors open. A girl, busy eating donuts, turns around at the sound of the doors opening. Livestein smiles and asks the girl if she rested well, calling her Wu and Historia, receiving a wide giggle from her. Meanwhile, 3 people are making their way along a dark passageway, planning to retreat at the sign of a monster. The captain tells the 2 to keep their guard up, noting they're in Primordial Core, and says they'll reach the first room soon. With a concerned look, he hopes that the information they received is accurate. A little ahead, the captain confirms the information was true, noting the monster hasn't appeared since the Hishitalt raid force went there. He looks around, believing there will be something they can take out, while the other man exclaims they will be rich. And so, the 3 of them move into the second room and then to the third room. However, they find nothing of value. The man with long hair questions if the information is spread, fearing other forces may have already swept the place for valuable items. They begin doubting whether they are in Primordial Core. The captain points ahead and says in the 5th room, an ancient plant monster called Anthropophago lies. He explains that it's a plant-type monster whose body can be turned into a hard ore and be sold for a lot. He believes if they can take the ore back, they will break even. The other 2 express concern about whether the 5th room might be empty or if there are more monsters inside. The captain asks the 2 if they plan on leaving empty-handed, and he makes it clear anyone who is afraid can leave. The 3 of them proceed further, entering the 5th room to find lots of vine-like plants spread all over the floor. The captain pulls out a blade and suggests they gather the plant and leave quickly. Suddenly, the captain notices something reflecting in his blade, and he begins to sweat in fear. The man under the hood asks the captain to repeat what he said. At that moment, the captain bellows to run away as Lord Swallow's huge open mouth tries to swallow him. However, none of the 3 manage to escape and get eaten. Patrick inspects the intruder's equipment and remarks there's nothing valuable, while Renee suggests they could have returned alive if they weren't so greedy. And with a loathing face, she mutters that she really hates humans. Patrick asks Swallow what he thinks, and Swallow claims those humans tasted better than the undead. Patrick explains the intruders weren't part of the Empire. Their coat of arms suggests they're from the West Crantle Kingdom. Renee checks the symbol and remarks that those guys did come a long way. Swallow, meanwhile, comments that it's like a local specialty being delivered to the front door. Based on this raid, Patrick realizes they can't delay reinforcing the dungeon, as rumors of it being void of monsters are spreading fast. But seeing Swallow's indifference, Patrick asks how he can be careless when it concerns his own dungeon. Patrick sternly threatens to bring his resignation letter and tells Swallow to come down, who agrees reluctantly. Patrick turns to Adjura and expresses relief that they have her with them. He credits Adjura's detection magic for alerting them to the intruders, causing her to blush. Swallow also agrees that Adjura is reliable, causing Renee to get jealous. Renee claims that she can also use magic, and Swallow praises her too. Adjura says she is glad she could be of help. Patrick points out that Adjura has saved them a lot of trouble. Adjura then asks how long she will need to stay as a guest. Meanwhile, at this time, far away, a monster informs someone that preparations are done. The monster suggests they should head towards Jadika, and the one the monster is speaking to is Lord Ubar. In the tranquil serenity of the night, Adjura sits atop a rocky outcropping, bathed in the ethereal moonlight. Adjura, despite being a demon king, laments her bleak future, as she lacks both money and a place to call home. She decides to make a decision soon since there will be a gathering for the demon kings in a couple of days. At that moment, Patrick arrives, finding the air more refreshing. Adjura asks Patrick if he is really out for some air, but Patrick points out that he is an undead. Patrick asks Asura why she's out, and she replies that she's there for some fresh air, then asks Patrick why he's out. Patrick explains that as he doesn't need sleep, he spends the time training. He points out that a swordsman's hand and sword, like his, rust if they aren't used. Patrick realizes it's his first time talking so casually to Asura like he is doing now. Clearing his throat nervously, he informs Asura that Mr. Tentacles is nearly recovered, Renee is waiting, and asks if she would like to go together. Seeing Mr. Tentacles, Asura says that he doesn't seem healed enough, and Patrick claims it's as good as it can get. Renee, who is on top of Mr. Tentacles, counts the total tentacles up to 68. Jumping down, Renee notes there's still a bit to go, with the recovery rate slow, predicting only 5 more tentacles will grow. Asura asks if Mr. Tentacles really fought the Hishitalt trade union. Patrick points out that Asura has her castle near Rie's and thinks it would be strange if she didn't know. Renee admits she would always know, as it was the raid force led by the greatest hero, Vern Hishitalt, that even killed her father. She wonders how powerful Mr. Tentacles must be for surviving a fight against such enemies. Moreover, Asura is certain if it were her, she would die like her father and accepts her wish to stay in Primordial Core was just a dream. As Mr. Tentacles is almost recovered, Asura thinks she should convince Swallow to recruit more monsters. Renee suggests they should only recruit males, like the golem from the 4th room. Asura addresses Patrick and Renee, gathering their attention. She says it will be best if she leaves for Jadika. Meanwhile, back in Rie's, someone asks Wooen how her wounds are. When Wooen responds she is fine, Livestein suggests Wooen pretend like her wounds are still recovering. Livestein asks Wooen if she wants tea, but Wooen says she will get ready for the meeting. Hearing this, Livestein remembers the meeting and asks Wooen if the maid arrived, but Wooen isn't sure since she was out. Livestein then asks Wooen to head to the meeting room first, claiming he needs to take care of some papers. Heeding the orders, Wooen leaves the room, telling Livestein to come quickly. Once Livestein is alone, he asks someone if they know about the maids who clean the tea set. From the darkness, a face with glowing eyes says he will find out as soon as possible. Livestein points out that with thousands of confidential files in the office, someone cleaning the tea set without permission implies they looked through the files. Livestein orders that stranger to find the maids and get rid of them in exactly 4 days. After a while, the meeting starts, and around a circular table, many members sit discussing the Black Disaster and Lord Swallow. The leader informs that the royal courts have announced that the Black Disaster is not Swallow and asks if anyone disputes this. Livestein counters, suggesting the announcement was to reassure citizens, prompting leader Cardi to ask if he has any proof linking the Black Disaster to Swallow. Livestein claims he saw it himself, Swallow fighting with hero Wooen, resulting in Garrote losing an arm. A man suddenly stands up in anger, accusing Livestein of lying, and Livestein responds that the evidence is right there. The leader looks over at Wooen and admits Livestein might be true. Livestein points out that Swallow appeared without any warning and suggests they should prepare as Swallow might return any time. The members there ponder this suggestion as someone asks how they can stop Swallow. One of them says that there were no faults in Rie's defenses earlier, so that means everything will be useless against Swallow. Livestein agrees with Duke Polthos's concern as he reminds them of the need for the 36th masterpiece. It turns out that everyone is looking for the 36th masterpiece, but they haven't been able to find it. Moreover, there aren't such strong individuals who can put up a fight against Swallow. Excluding Wooen, the other humans are all fragile, and no matter how much they train, they are sure they can't even scratch Swallow. To overcome this problem, Livestein feels like the 36th masterpiece is a must, but he is concerned as nobody is able to find it. Livestein mentions that the Pope's movements have been strange lately, as he has spread the rumors that Swallow was God's punishment. A woman stands up, dismissing it as nonsense, while Livestein argues it's not surprising given the Empire's religious suppression. Hearing this, that woman's veins pop in her temple as she warns Livestein to watch his mouth. But Livestein smirks, which enrages the woman, who bellows out, asking if it sounds like a joke. The woman grabs onto Livestein's collar while Livestein repeats he is just stating the truth. Suddenly, a masked man points a sword at the woman's throat, telling her she's overestimating her own power. Livestein swipes his hand and says he isn't taking the issue lightly as the masked man disappears. Livestein explains that if they leave the issue alone, the Empire will split into 2. Moreover, the Pope faction is holding 3 of the 36 masterpieces, calling them holy relics. Livestein realizes that to take those masterpieces back, a great holy war will be needed. Back in the core of the Ancient, Patrick has informed Swallow of something which he isn't taking seriously. This angers Patrick, who hisses and bellows at Swallow, informing him that Asura has left. Patrick repeats to Swallow that Lady Asura has left, and Swallow dismisses it as unimportant, saying he heard it the first time. Seeing Swallow take this information lightly, Patrick shouts at him to listen properly and think before speaking. Swallow covers his ears in irritation, saying Asura went to Judika for the Demon King's ball, so there's no need to fuss. Patrick grabs Swallow's paw, pulls it away from his ear, and shouts again that it will be a problem if Asura doesn't return. Swallow points out that Asura didn't say she would not return, and Patrick, pondering, admits Swallow is correct. Patrick says that even before leaving, Asura was acting strange. He also mentions that Asura hadn't said, "I'll be back." Renee claims that she too felt Asura's behavior was strange and thinks Asura might be planning to start her own force again. Swallow asks Renee what she just brought. Renee, smiling, reveals that it's a stew she prepared. Patrick jokingly says the stew will taste bad, causing Renee to give him a smack across his face. Swallow dismisses Asura leaving as insufficient reason for their gathering and asks the two if they have anything else to say. Patrick explains that they can't delay in replenishing the monsters in the dungeon any longer. Swallow, looking irritated, complains that everything is getting pushed onto him. He lies down, refusing to move and reminding the two that as his guardians, they're supposed to handle their boss's tasks. Patrick admits that Swallow is correct, but states it won't work. He then reminds Swallow he has to take care of the aftermath in Harston, so claims he will be busy. Swallow asks Patrick who else will do the task if not him, and Patrick points to Renee. Renee, looking pleased, assures Swallow not to worry and leave it all to her. Meanwhile, Swallow worries, noting Renee's eye condition could arouse suspicion. Patrick tells Swallow he can rest and leave all the problems to Renee. Swallow realizes he will have to do it now as Patrick suggests maybe they can get Asura. The old man driving the carriage informs Asura they've arrived and bids her to take care of herself as she exits. Asura looks ahead and is surprised that she actually came to the mercenary city, Nihit. As she moves along the streets, she notices everyone there looks dangerous. The city is located between two powerhouses and it's not affiliated with any force. 1 in 4 people in the city are involved in dungeon raids, making it the hub for dungeon information. In this unfamiliar and mapless place, Asura decides to navigate by the stars to find her way to Judika. She looks around and sees a building as big as the Demon King's castle. She also senses the place is filled with defense mana as well as strong guards. Looking at the front door, Asura sees a guard stop a man and allow him to go inside after checking something. Asura thinks it won't be easy to gather info when suddenly, from an alley, she sees dark mana. Alarmed by it, she follows it. She then comes across some monsters locked up in cages. Asura closes her nose due to the bad smell as she wonders if the monsters have been captured. The air is full of screeching, screaming, and growling sounds of the monsters. At that moment, someone appears behind Asura, and she turns around. A huge man expresses surprise seeing Asura there and asks why she is there. Asura remains silent and keeps staring at that man while a dog-like monster behind the cage whimpers. The man introduces himself as Pun, a merchant, and bowing, asks Asura if she needs anything. Pun suspects that although Asura looks like a child, she must not be normal as she is alone in a dangerous place. So he thinks he shouldn't get on her bad side. Asura introduces herself and asks about the place, and Pun explains it's a storage warehouse for dungeon items. He says that most things there are used as materials for equipment and that he sells those items there. Smiling, Pun requests Asura to have a look around. Asura's attention goes towards a huge beast, a lycanthrope. It's a strong demonic being that held its ground till the end in the Great War. Asura wants to buy it, so she asks Pun for the cost. Pun is surprised to see Asura wants to buy a lycanthrope as he reminds her it's very dangerous. Asura firmly tells Pun to just name his price. Pun looks through the list and claims the price is 250 ONS, hearing which Asura is shocked. Asura does have the money, but it's still too expensive. Renee had given her around 5,000 ONS before departing, but she doesn't want to spend half of it before even building her castle. So Asura says she will have a look at other beasts as well. As she inspects around, a beast draws her interest, and she asks about it, but Pun says he doesn't know much about it either. He explains that the raid party found the beast but couldn't find its mother and brought it back. The beast begins to pant, and Asura puts her hand inside the cell, trying to pat it while Pun shouts it's dangerous. However, as Asura pats the beast, it closes its eyes in satisfaction. Asura assures Pun she won't place any blame on him as Pun, who is sweating, says the beast could have bitten her. The beast looks content as it opens its mouth in pleasure, causing Asura to like it. She asks for its price. The night has fallen, and Asura, who has bought the beast, is in its company. Asura claims that the beast is a lot bigger than she thought. She wasn't able to know its exact size as its half-body was hidden in the dark cell and she only saw its head. Asura then decides to name the beast 2ONS. Who woofs in agreement. Asura looks up and remembers she was told the night falls 30 minutes early here, which she realizes is correct. She sits down beside 2ONS, exclaiming the sky is really beautiful, which reminds her of the primordial core. Getting emotional, she quickly reminds herself it's time not to get emotional as she needs to get to Judica quickly. She calls 2ONS and gets on her way. With 2ONS trotting by her side, Asura stops some time later, noticing something. A huge stag is standing on top of a hill, seeing which Asura thinks she is at the right place. She declares her return, instructs the stag to lead the way, and it transforms into a human with a stag's head. Bowing to welcome Asura, the stagman instructs Asura to head to the fallen monastery behind the mountains where the other demon kings have already arrived. Following the instruction, Asura and 2ONS make their way forward. But Asura stops and tells 2ONS that he can't accompany her to the meeting. She instructs 2ONS to stay put until she returns, advising him to hide if he spots a human. Asura strokes 2ONS, explaining she can't bring him due to strict rules, while reconsidering if 2ONS is a fitting name. So, she tries to find a new name as she gazes into the smiling face of 2ONS. While gazing intently, an image of Swallow appears in Asura's mind, prompting her to name 2ONS Devd. With a promise to be back as soon as possible, she unfolds her wings and flies away, commanding Dev to sit. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Swallow irritably curses Patrick, who reminds Swallow that he's been using the same curse for too long. So Swallow curses Patrick that he gets osteoporosis. Patrick advises Swallow not to overthink and suggests approaching the mission as a leisure activity, and he flings something toward Swallow, who catches it. It's the bracelet that helps control Swallow's mana, and Patrick claims he has 30 more of these. Swallow remembers Patrick had said they are expensive and asks Patrick if he is using all the dungeon funds. Patrick asks if he mentioned that it's a cheap item, and when Swallow questions if he lied, Patrick admits he did so to ensure Swallow would take care of it. At that moment, Renee arrives fully packed, asking Swallow if he's been waiting long and suggesting they leave. She appears to be blushing, imagining the mission as a honeymoon with Swallow, hoping they can be alone together and eat together. Swallow tries to turn back, saying they should begin the next day, but Patrick grabs onto his hair and pulls him back. Patrick, with a serious look, warns Swallow to try nothing funny and reminds them of the reason why they are leaving. As Swallow and Renee leave, Patrick tells them to return without causing any trouble. While on their way, Swallow asks Renee where they are headed, and Renee says they're going to Niet. Meanwhile, Patrick seems a little concerned and hopes it wasn't a mistake sending Swallow and Renee. But he tries to assure himself that as long as they use their heads, they won't cause any problems. A massive castle lies in ruins, where Asura is on her way to the Demon King's conference. Along the corridor, Asura looks around, noting it's been a while. Finally, she reaches the meeting of the Demon Kings, Judica, to find many other demon kings already gathered. The demon kings all turn around and stare at Asura as she enters the hall, some even grinning at her. Asura grabs a drink, feeling really nervous. Previously, when her father would bring her to this event, she would always be the center of attention. But now, she is kind of irrelevant. As Asura is about to take a sip, someone bumps into her, and angrily she turns, bellowing who dares. She sees it's a human and, in rage, tries to attack him. However, she notices the man is smiling, and without a word, he walks away, ignoring Asura. Seeing this, the other demon kings all jeer and laugh at Asura. Asura realizes that the others are looking down on her as they are aware she is powerless to fight back. Tearing up with anger, she decides to put up with it, but once she creates a great army, she will pay them back. Suddenly, someone's hand grabs Asura again, and this time, too pissed, she turns around, preparing to attack. But she stops as she sees it's a girl who asks her if she is really Asura. Asura also recognizes the girl as Marmolia. Marmolia, who is overcome with joy, gives Asura a tight hug, saying she is happy to see Asura isn't dead. Still grinning, Marmolia points out that it's been a long time but remembers she and Asura used to play as kids like it was just yesterday. Asura frees herself, calls Marmolia rude, and suggests they go somewhere else to talk. In Mercenary City, Niet, someone drops 2 pieces of gold coins, asking the inn clerk for the best room. It's Swallow and Renee, as the clerk hurriedly says he will guide them. Once in their room, Swallow jumps down into the bed, saying he wants to rest. Swallow mutters that it feels nice, while Renee nervously tells him he can't just lay there. Swallow claims they walked for too long without resting, as Renee says she heard about a dungeon store nearby. Smiling, she says they will just have to pick some monsters from there and asks Swallow to come with her. But seeing Swallow throw tantrums, Renee assumes Swallow must be very tired. Suddenly, a greedy look appears on her face as she believes this will be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Flashback. Before Swallow and Renee left the core of the Ancient, Patrick had asked Renee if she wanted to have a nice time with Swallow alone. This offer had made Renee excited, and she had asked if it would be a date, which Patrick had affirmed. With a thrilled look, Renee had asked if she and Swallow could have their honeymoon, which Patrick had agreed to as well. Present. Now, Swallow complains that he can't even lie down for a good rest. He gets up with difficulty and suggests they get it all over with. Meanwhile, Renee is hopeful that she will definitely make Swallow hers this time. She gets excited beyond measure as she realizes she and Swallow will have a perfect honeymoon, and seeing Renee's reaction, Swallow is in disbelief. Meanwhile, alone, Adjura and her childhood friend Marmolia discuss the investigation of Adjura's castle, now found to be under human control. Marmolia says everyone thought Adjura had died and asks where she was in the past 2 months. Adjura claims she was just wandering around and decides not to mention the truth. Marmolia grabs onto Adjura's hand and smiling, says it's great that Adjura is still alive. Meanwhile, Adjura expresses gratitude to Marmolia, relieved that Marmolia doesn't harbor the same resentment as the other demon kings. Marmolia says that the rivalry was between their fathers and there's no need for her and Adjura to hate each other. She also asks Adjura if she is there to ask for help. Adjura realizes Marmolia already knows everything as Marmolia agrees to help Adjura. Marmolia says she is offering help to Adjura as a friend and not as a demon king. Saying this, Marmolia extends her hand and asks Adjura to go back with her. Adjura offers her hand and thanks Marmolia for helping her, revealing her desire to rebuild her castle. Grinning, Marmolia holds onto Adjura's hand, telling her she will be able to do it. Up in the ceiling, a large spider finally catches a silk moth, referring to Adjura being trapped in Marmolia's fake trust. Young Adjura screams out that her dad is stronger and the real descendant of Asmodeus. Screaming back, young Marmolia argues her dad is stronger and has a cooler-looking horn. Marmolia and Adjura would always fight when young. It wasn't really a difference in their habits and personality, yet they always had conflicts. Adjura always thought maybe the reason was the influence of their fathers, who were always on bad terms with each other. Well, it was true that they were on bad terms, but it couldn't be said that they weren't friends. However, an event occurred which changed everything between Marmolia and Adjura. At least that's what Adjura thought. At present, Marmolia guides the way, telling Adjura to follow, and Adjura, thinking about the past, mutters she is being childish. Marmolia asks what Adjura is saying, to which Adjura replies it's nothing and asks Marmolia where she is taking her. Marmolia points out that she alone will not be able to help Adjura rebuild her forces and claims there are others wanting to help. Marmolia opens massive doors, saying it's this way. Adjura, who is smiling, ceases her smile when she sees what is inside the room. Inside the room, there are some massive horned demon kings, with a bright light behind them. In shock, Adjura turns to Marmolia, puzzled, while Marmolia, bowing, tells the ones inside the room she has brought Adjura. Reality hits Adjura as she realizes she is still too young and trusted Marmolia, who hasn't changed a bit. Grinning, Marmolia calls Adjura a loser. Adjura enters the room and gets on her knees, bowing to someone. The Satan's direct lineage 4th generation, Demon King Ubar, addresses Adjura and calls her a disappointment. Marmolia, who is beside Adjura, calls her stupid. Marmolia whispers to Adjura, asking if she really thought someone like her would be welcomed in Jadika. Adjura kind of knew that she wouldn't be treated well, but she never imagined she would be so humiliated. Ubar gives Adjura a chance to give her excuse. Adjura, still bowing, claims it's a misunderstanding and she hasn't lost to humans. Stammering, she says she is telling the truth. The other demon kings think Adjura is lying, and one even suggests they just kill Adjura. Meanwhile, Adjura is speechless as she has no rebuttal, as the loss of the army is always the Demon King's fault. So Adjura bows deeper and accepts it's all her fault. One of the Demon Kings disgraces Adjura for being their race, while another demands how dare she return to Jadika. More of them agree to kill Adjura, while Marmolia, standing behind, gives a grin. A final decision is made to not let Adjura free and decide on what to do to her on the last day of Jadika. Until then, Marmolia orders to place Adjura in the criminal jail. Meanwhile, back in the city, a guard is stopping Swallow from entry, asking for his insignia for entry. The guard sees Swallow as a beggar and Renee as a maid and thinks Swallow might fall over any minute. Renee withdraws 2 A-class insignias, seeing which, the guard is shocked. He allows them into the dungeon store, where Swallow asks Renee how she got the insignias, and she replies she found them while cleaning. Swallow remembers that there must be many such insignias in the core of the ancient lost by raid members. Inside the store, a lot of notices are put on a large board, all of which hold information regarding dungeons. Swallow asks what they are looking for. Renee explains that they need to search for a strong monster that hasn't been taken down by humans. Swallow says he should have brought another monster from the Great Evil Dungeons but realizes it won't work. He suggests it will be fine if the monster is just below the Great Evil Dungeons, while Renee is busy looking at the notices. After a while, Renee hands over some notices to Swallow, saying they should be good for levels just below the Great Evil Dungeons. At that moment, a cleaner informs them he has to start cleaning and asks if they can return the next day. Renee says they want to stay a bit longer, but the cleaner points out that everyone has left and they can't keep the store open any longer. Renee doesn't want to drag the process, fearing it will interfere with her date plan, while Swallow doesn't want to return back no matter what, so he decides to kill the cleaner. Renee responds in time and hands over a gold coin to the cleaner to bribe him. The cleaner asks Renee what type of raid request she is looking for, and Renee points ahead, asking for that particular one. Later that night, Renee and Swallow are going through all the raid requests they brought from the store. All the requests they are not interested in, they are throwing away. Swallow, who seems bored, says he should have just recruited Asura but thinks she is too weak to be a guardian. Renee points out that comparing the level of humans challenging the Great Evil Dungeons, Asura will reach her limits in 3 years. She also claims that Asura looks her coolest as a demon king only. Swallow accepts it's true but still hopes he should have asked Asura once. He says that Asura was helpful in bringing Renee home and thinks he let her go too easily. Moreover, Swallow also remembers he even blew away Asura's castle as well. He asks how long Jadika goes on for, and Renee says it's a 2-day event and points out they need to get there before that. Swallow says they should go there, and Renee claims to get there they need to read the stars, which she doesn't know. However, Swallow says he knows how to read the stars. The night is high and full of stars, with the Stagman analyzing them while Dev pants beside him. The Stagman mutters that it's unsettling. At that moment, someone arrives, prompting the Stagman to sense their presence and warn them to stop right there. The Stagman turns around and observes that the arrival doesn't resemble a demon king. He warns that only demon kings are allowed further, threatening that others will lose their lives if they continue walking forward. The Stagman, now enraged, summons his third eye and asserts that he has given the arrival enough warning, but they persist in advancing. He then bellows out that as long as he is guarding, he will never let any intruder like Swallow get past him alive. Meanwhile, Swallow complains that the Stagman is too loud. Back at Jadika, in the dungeons, Marmolia mocks Asura, asking how it is in there. But Asura, who has been in prison, doesn't respond. Marmolia, grinning, informs Asura that back in the council, they were deciding to kill Asura and set an example to all. She claims that as Asura's friend, she convinced them not to do that. Marmolia reveals that the other punishment decided for Asura is to cut off her horns and pull out her fangs. Marmolia makes fun of Asura more, saying without fangs and horns, she will be looked down upon by all the demons. She continues taunting Asura, saying Asura would never dream of such punishment and expresses a desire to see Asura in such a state. Marmolia's smirk darkens as she approaches Asura's cell, warning her that posing as a demon king won't work anymore and mentioning she has another idea. Marmolia then offers Asura a post as her underling. Marmolia says that she will even offer Asura a higher position if she licks her boots properly. Despite all this taunting, Asura remains silent. At that moment, 2 guards arrive, announcing an order to take Asura to criminal court. Marmolia gives permission to the guards to take Asura and opens the cell. As Asura is taken away, Marmolia claims the fun is just beginning. A judge in the court bellows out that the trial to determine the punishment will start now. He announces that Asura has lost the trust of other demons by bringing great shame upon the Demon King title. The punishment for Asura's crime will result in her horns being cut off and her fangs pulled out. The judge then offers Asura a last chance for her rebuttal and asks if she has anything to say. Asura speaks out that though she spent less time in the cell, she thought about many things. She points out that she can't understand why the weak fall prey while the strong survive. She explains the Demon King army was meant to protect her, but now the weak army is dead, leaving only the strong, and she can't grasp the issue. Hearing this, the other demons shout at Asura, asking if that's how she thinks of her army. Asura questions why she's being blamed for discarding her army and challenges them on whether they know how she treated her troops. Marmolia bursts into laughter, mocking Asura for boasting despite her army being wiped out, suggesting Asura may have lost her mind. Asura claims she has finally come to her senses and calls out the council for considering her a criminal even though she is innocent. Asura cuts off Marmolia and addresses Demon King Ubar directly, calling out the farce and addressing him as Sir. Marmolia is bewildered and howls in anger at Asura for daring to speak in such a tone to Lord Ubar. Lord Ubar tells Marmolia to forget it and claims Asura saying anything doesn't affect him in the slightest. Finally, Asura realizes that whatever she says will not change the outcome. She also feels like laughing at Ubar, the so-called supreme being, and other demon kings who are so ignorant. Surprisingly, Asura kind of feels relieved. The judge shouts out that they will decide the punishment on Asura's insolence after carrying out the first official punishment. A goblin-like monster walks in carrying a cleaver-like blade to cut off Asura's horns. Asura is still on her knees as the goblin tells her to brace herself as it might hurt, and he inches the blade close to Asura's horns. Suddenly, at that moment, the air fills with the bark of a dog, alarming everyone. The demon kings are all puzzled as to who is making such noises. The judge asks where the noise is coming from. Asura, meanwhile, wonders if Swallow has arrived there. She thinks it's better to listen to a dog bark than the bullshit of the demon kings. But Asura finds it hard to believe Swallow is there as there's no way he would do such. Still hoping Swallow is there, she turns around, tears filling her eyes. Swallow, sitting on a chair, calls out to Asura and, in anger, says she seems to be having a hard time.